By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny brae, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where in deep purple hue the Highland hills we view. You guys are in right away. Were you just sitting there with your finger on the button, ready to as fast as possible? I feel like I literally hit record, and Eric, you just like kicked in the door. You were like camped out, ready to go. You had like a little sign and everything, it looked like. I'm impressed. Mainly. Famita right there too. You got edged out just a little bit by Eric. Well done. Well done. I usually expect that I'm gonna have to like wait a couple of minutes before you guys are you guys come on in. Not today. Fuck that. We got shit to talk about. Something happened today, guys, that wasn't just the Russian-Ukrainian war. I was like, whoa. Actual news that's not completely related to the Russia-Ukrainian war? Holy shit. It is actually fairly significant news. I made today's video about it, which is the NDP's choice to prop up the Liberal government. Hey, Major, how you doing? This is an annoying story, because this is one of these stories where they're saying like, oh, we're doing it so that you can get dental, right? You can do it for dental. Hey, Watson, how you doing, bud? You want to talk about this issue? It's been gnawing on you. So, Watson, rebel, revolt, repent. It is a call to action. It is non-specific on purpose. Because repentance, I say it to remind people. Everyone in their life has something, has someone, has some situation, has something that they wish they could have done differently, that they wish they could have approached differently. And I say it in order to inspire or instill in people this desire to seek out the aspect of their own life where they themselves may have run afoul. And instead of allowing, yes, absolutely. But also to the people who are around us, also to the, to all aspects, to all things. My upbringing, of course, is fundamentalist Christian. And we live in a largely Christian society. And so I use repent as a call to action for an individual. It isn't so much that I believe that everyone does need to repent, although we are who we are as a people. But I do think that it is good to use this language in order to inspire contemplation in that regard and in that direction. I've also come to see, hey, Grinning, hi, Seraphim, how you doing? Like, here's a story of a usage of the word repent that I found to be quite interesting. I go to protests. I help organize protests, specifically around the concept of, hey, have you noticed how we're abandoning the poor and disabled in this country? We give less to the disabled than the Americans do. Inflation is absolutely destroying this section of our community. It's causing enormous problems, massive problems. You give somebody, $1,100 and tell them to survive. Average rent is $1,200. Doesn't take a genius to figure out how this goes, right? And I have gone to protests where disabled people have been in the streets speaking on microphones, holding up signs, basically pointing out the emergency that this is, and people have stood on the side and made fun of them. I've seen that. People who have called them losers, spit at them, derided them actively. And what I say to those people when they begin addressing me is repent. And I've seen how it shocks people. I've seen how it startles people. People don't expect to hear the word. People don't expect to see that kind of language enter the conversation, because it is fundamentally a religious word. It harkens very much to Jonah and the whale. Is a very strong biblical story where repentance is a key theme. For those who don't know, the story of Jonah and the whale is Jonah gets called by God to go to Nineveh, which is a fallen, sinful city, and tell them to seek repentance or God will destroy the city. Jonah, of course, doesn't want to do this, and so he runs away from his calling, and he does this by getting onto a boat and trying to flee the land. And so God has him swallowed by a whale, and he spends, I believe, 3 days in the belly of a whale, until finally Jonah himself repents. And so Jonah is vomited up on the shores of Nineveh. After having spent 3 days in the belly of a whale, this man walks into the city of Nineveh and tells the people of the city to repent. And you can imagine the sight of it. And so the leaders do. They fall into mourning. They tear their clothes and wear sackcloth. They give their money to the poor. They seek repentance. And so God spares them. And I mean, you say, should I repent for my Trotskyism? Do you feel guilty about your Trotskyism? Do you feel bad about your Trotskyism? The non-specific nature of the call, I think, is what really matters most. Because perhaps you've had an argument with your family member that you wish could have gone differently. Perhaps you are one of these people who have mocked people in the past. Perhaps you used to be a reactionary fundamentalist Christian. I don't know. But I do know that allowing those things to sit and fester is deadly and devastating. And that festering is what is being called to address. And in a society that treasures and praises selfishness above all else, the selfishness of the individual, then seeking repentance is itself a revolutionary act, because it requires a humbling and a subservience to an other, even if that other is your mother or your brother or your sister or just a friend or an acquaintance even, let alone some kind of concept of a large, great creator. And I do feel as if every person in the society simply spent a moment of their lives in this kind of contemplative state, wondering to themselves, do I need to seek repentance from someone? Do I need to seek some kind of restitution? Have I wronged someone, even on accident? Then I think the world would be a much better place. Because it would mean for even a moment you're thinking of someone other than yourself. And I feel like when I get to, there you go. And I forgive you, Nova Scotia. I was a fundamentalist Christian myself. I argued to homosexuals that their homosexuality was sinful and wrong. And that's something I repent for. I've lost good people from my life. I know that that's the truth. That there are many people who could have been my friends, could have been my allies, and I actively sought a path of alienation, and I simply didn't have to. And I see so much in our society how we alienate. Thank you, Pissed Off. Thank you, bud. I appreciate that. How we alienate for no reason. For no reason whatsoever. Like this conflict, for example, this Ukrainian-Russian conflict. It's one of the most pointless conflicts ever seen. Derived of nothing for nothing. To no purpose for no end. That has completely backfired. You think our Canada is owned by the Liberal Party? Interesting. I finally got banned from our Canada because I was posting links showing how we were funding Nazis. That's the thing that finally got me off of our Canada. Started banning anyone supporting the CPC or PPC or any anti-Trudeau comments. Oh my God. Like, this is the thing. Like, this is how silly they are, right? Watson. I like your original comment. I've punched several fishes in the face. Not sorry. Okay. Whoa. But this is how weak they are. That you can't even grumble against the leader any longer. Like, that's an act of total weakness. Right? Like, literally, it's old men grumbling in their cups in pubs. Like, that's... You don't need to... That's not a special moment in history. That's all moments in history. And if you're going around banning old men grumbling in pubs about their leadership, you're out of luck. Oh yeah, don't trust the Liberals. They will betray you. I mean, this story, which I believe Vince, was it you? Pointed out. What do we got? Terrible day today. 3 more years of major right-wing neoliberalism. Controlled opposition is powerful. The ruling class never fails to disappoint. Yeah, and I keep getting told that, well, we should be celebrating. Look at us. We're all getting dental. And my response has become, oh yeah, we'll all have clean teeth while we live in the streets. Maybe we'll be able to afford getting that tooth replaced after a cop beans it right out of our head with a baton, right? Like, so we'll have the straightest, whitest, cleanest teeth of all the homeless people in the world. Like, this... If this dental care stuff came down the pipe, and it was coming down the pipe like 20 years ago, then I think it could be somewhat warranted. But we are amidst an enormous crisis. Like, the scale of this crisis cannot be overstated. Housing prices alone are just going through the roof, and there's no end in sight to it. The hack economists at Oxford, who for the last 40 years have been espousing this religious ideology of neoliberalism, so they've been wrong for 40 years, they're saying that, oh, well, the market could crash as much as 40% in the next few years. And then you take a look at it and you see, if the market collapsed 40%, it would still be outrageously high. It would mean that prices would go down to what they were in like 2018. So they'd still be out of reach for the vast majority of Canadians. Something like 25%, only 25% of Canadians say that they are even looking to buy a house at the moment, which makes sense. Like, and the entire thing is being propped up by this neoliberal ideology that says, let's give all the money to a small group of people. That should work out, right? And instead of trickling the money back into the economy for the improvement and benefit of all, rising tide raises all boats and all this, yabba yabba, right? They're actively withholding the very thing that we need to survive, housing, and it's not for any kind of scheme or plan. It literally is, they've run out of things to buy, that they have so much wealth and so much extravagance and so much glut that they're literally buying up housing because there's nothing else for them to buy. Outstanding. Outstanding. That the collapse of this of the society is happening at a rapid pace. And the capitalists are betraying even the very people who have been their most ardent and virulent defenders. Like, it's not going to be much longer now. Like, we're getting older by the day. I'm one of the older millennials. I'm the elder millennial, right? Well, when we're all 50, right, and we're still facing these issues, and not only are we facing them, but they've gotten much, much worse. Well, you think these NDP and these liberals are going to do anything about it, right? But by that point, I expect they'll be talking about raising the minimum wage to $25 or something, right? That things will have gotten so absurd. I got called a boomer last night. Oh my God! Congratulations, you're an adult. You did it. You did it. It's as if people don't understand the nature of social democracy and how it betrays the working class historically. No, of course they don't understand that. Take a look at what's going on in the United States. People think that you vote in social democracy, that you take your ballot and you vote it in, right? And that's never been the history of these social democracies. Social democracy is a compromise in a rising tide of communism, right? That the capitalists begin capitulating power to social democracy, or this idea of social democracy, because the alternative for them is the removal of their power, which is the loss of their ownership of the society. And so they begin giving it away, right? And as we saw under FDR, right, that the capital, like, things were so desperate and bad when FDR finally came to power that the capitalists were willing to give away literally everything. The tax rate went up to 90%. The drop in this extravagant hoarding of wealth sharply dropped, precipitously. Ownership of this hoarded property had to be redistributed. Everything shifted and changed dramatically. They capitulated to enormous social programs, enormous work programs, right? Things like unemployment insurance, old age pensions, right? These unheard of policies that had never existed in American society. They all capitulated, all of it, except the means of production. And FDR knew it. He understood that that was the case. When he was on his last legs, they asked him what was the thing that he was most pleased with during his tenure. And he didn't say that he alleviated poverty or that he helped the people of America or he built a strong middle class or any of this. He said, I saved capitalism, because he understands and understood what capitalism is, which is the private ownership of the means of production by a small group of psychopaths. And the mistake, and I call it a mistake, that the capitalists and socialists made under FDR is that they capitulated. That once they received all of these benefits, they didn't kill the beast when it was weak. They said, we've weakened it. Our quality of life has improved. Well, let's just move on and enjoy this improved quality of life. And they did. But the issue with not killing the beast when you have the chance is that the beast gets stronger again and then destroys all of the gains that were made. And now this monster is literally creating an existential threat where the destruction of the human species itself is on the table. So this enormous mistake that the communists and socialists made under FDR in the name of social democracy has been a complete failure. It's backfired entirely. And if we don't build a similar movement to what was required in order to get those gains under FDR again, and surround the halls of power and do what was done in order to get those gains, and then actually kill the monster, remove the means of production from the psychopath class and destroy these psychopaths at the source, if we don't scale the mountain, Mount Doom, and actually throw the ring into the fire, if we believe we can wield the ring, well, the ring wins. And next time, should we survive this apocalypse that is upon us, should we survive it, well, next time it will be 10 times worse. Because that's how the capitalist death cult operates. Its goal is the destruction of the species, and it's obvious. You just need to look at how it operates and what it does. It's not interested in the survival of the species, nor is it even interested in its own survival. It's literally a chaotic force of total destruction. If it were manifest as a physical being in the world, it would be a god of death, without a doubt. No doubt at all. It would be just a crazed, insane god of death. And I feel like that's obvious. And people have it in their heads that you vote in these sorts of things. It's never how it works. It's never how it works. This is why we need to surround the halls of power. Because we need to put pressure. Like, look at how they're acting amidst this enormous crisis. Like, dental care. Yeah, here you go. Your teeth will be nice and straight while you're homeless in the streets. Like, that's literally what they're saying. And we're just, like, clapping along and accepting it. Being like, yeah, yes, queen. Yeah, NDP, they did it. Ha, ha, ha. Like, who I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it'll be nice to be able to go to the dentist and have the dentist like, yeah, here's your checkup, all that kind of stuff. Yep. See ya, have a good day, and not have to like pay money and all that, right? That'll be nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm not upset about it, but you know, it's like you're seeing a drowning man in the ocean, and you drive by in your super mega yacht, and you throw out like a branch. And the branch lands and floats beside the guy drowning in the ocean, and he like grabs a hold of it, puts his arm around it, and it's enough to keep him kind of afloat as long as he, kind of treads water and keeps like hanging on. And then you and your giant mega yacht go, yeah, I helped, and then drive off. Like I'm sure the guy is happy that he's got the stick. Like I'm sure he's sitting there being like, well, this is better than what was happening previously. But you kind of look at the guy in the big mega yacht and you go like, hey, couldn't you just pull me out of the fucking ocean? Couldn't you just pull me out of this? And is there no space on your big giant mega yacht? And there is. Absolutely there is. There's 1,000 empty rooms on the mega yacht. They don't care, and they drive off and they think that they've done the greatest thing in the world. Right? Like the question that I'm beginning to ask, and I'm wondering if I'd like to see the divide on this. Is it just that they're detached from reality, or is it actual malice? Like, is it, or contempt, right? Like, is it that they actually are contemptuous of the populace, or is it just they're so detached from the lived reality of what it is to be a citizen of the country that they have no idea what's happening? In any kind of intrinsic, meaningful way. That to them it's an abstraction that's too far removed from their own lives. So they can't even begin to understand that there's a crisis going on. Like you're attempting to describe what a house fire is to someone who's never seen or experienced fire. Right? So they understand that it's difficult for you. that, yeah, okay, it's a situation, okay, sure, but they don't really understand what they're looking at, or what it is. They don't understand the heat. They don't understand the fierceness of it. They don't understand that fire can overwhelm you and smoke can knock you out. I actually know someone who lost her father in a house fire, right? And her father went down to the basement where the fire was, and as the story goes, he opens up the door and the smoke came out and just knocked him right out. He just immediately passed out. Right? We as humans like to believe that we're the strongest force in the world, but the natural world can overwhelm us completely. But if you don't know what a fire is, if you don't know what fire looks like, you don't know what it can do, right? Well, it can overwhelm you pretty quickly. And so I wonder if it's more just like a delusional incompetence, just a detached, insipid stupidity, or if it is actually contempt. I mean, given who Justin Trudeau is, I mean, we know that he mocks minority groups in his spare time, wears blackface, makes fun of them, right? We're aware of this ethos. Like if you talk about somebody who needs repentance, right, you're talking about Justin Trudeau, without a doubt. Like here's someone who literally in his 30s, like was walking around wearing blackface. Like and he's somehow still the leader of our country. Very, very telling where we're at as Canadians, I think. Anything less than his resignation, I mean, like, are you kidding? But I guess, he's a Trudeau, right? Floofy hair. We just stopped talking about it. Some riding execs left the NDP today. Not so good for Jugmeat. I expect them to lose even more seats next election. What a joke. We don't have time to wait. We need results now. I mean... But that's fine. Like, again, I'll say it over and over about Jagmeet Singh. Like, Jagmeet he's not actually interested in being the leader of Canada. He wants to be the leader of the NDP. That's good enough for him, right? And once he's no longer the leader of the NDP, he'll have the same experience as all of these guys. He'll go work for some corporation, some billionaire oligarch, right? Sitting on some, corporate board where he's paid $100,000 to do a speech once a year, that kind of thing, right? Like, that's exactly what's going to happen to him. And even if he does get into power, like, what is he actually offering, right? Like, we're going to increase taxes on the wealthy by what, 1%, 2%? Even if it's like 5%. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, there's no meaningful change, right? The arrangement still is you do all the work. We do nothing. We do nothing, right? Like, that's still the arrangement. This Lib NDP move might be a fundraising giant for the CPC. We'll see. We'll see about that. The CPC are themselves, like, off in the, like, you had Candice Bergen literally calling for a no-fly zone. Like, literally calling for World War III in Parliament. Like, and yet 30% of the country supports it. Like, our politics in this country is an outrageous joke. Like, a failure on a level that I don't think can actually be fully articulated successfully. Like, it's enormous how psychotic we've become. And psychotic is the word to use. Like, literally, we are... What do we got? We got the PPC, and they're a rising power, and they're on the far, far, far right. Their solutions are things like abandon the populace harder, right? Just let corporations have as much wealth as possible. Just I saw a Christopher Hitchens quote, which I thought was perfect. He said, libertarianism is the charming idea that Americans are not yet selfish enough. And then you have the conservatives, and the conservatives are just deranged. Like, they're power mad. They don't care about anything except power at this point. And Pierre Poilievre is going to be very dangerous, because I do think that Pierre Poilievre has figured out what O'Toole and Scheer, and even Harper to a degree, had not really figured out, which was that the way to get power in Canada is to lie. Right? Like, that is how you actually get power in Canada. Take a look at Justin Trudeau. Probably one of the most effective liars maybe in the history of the country. Right? everything that has ever come out of his mouth has been a complete lie. And even when he's made good on some of the things that he said, it's only in this very technical, like, checkmark, we did it kind of a way, right? It's never had like a fullness. There's never been a completion to it. So like for legal marijuana, for example, right? So they like decriminalize marijuana, but everybody who's in prison for it, they stayed there, right? Because, you know, that's still money for the prison system. The and I mean, that's really the only thing he's ever actually moved on. Like, I can't believe how successful these liberals have been at absolutely being duplicitous liars. Like, all they've ever done is say, we hear you, and acknowledge what you're saying. Climate change is an emergency. Like, that's all they've ever done. Like, they don't actually care to do things. And the things that they have done that were actually impactful, something like the CERB, well, they worked overtime to make sure that got dismantled. Couldn't have a basic income for people. Couldn't have something permanent, right? Couldn't do that. Right? They worked harder to get rid of the CERB than they've worked on anything else. Like, and the implementation of and what's so funny is that the implementation of the CERB was so easy to do. Right? It was simple. It was really, really easy. Right? It proved to the Canadian people that we absolutely have the mechanisms to distribute wealth into the populace. We could do it in a week. It would take no time at all. It took no time for them to do it. Right? They were motivated by their own personal desperation, and they did it. It was just boom. They just put it together. And then it took them about a year to steadily dismantle it. Right? Which they did. They worked really hard to dismantle that policy and that program. Right? In an overt and obvious betrayal of Canadians. And yet we're still supporting this. And it is because, like, the options are so trash. Like, and then you look over at the NDP, and they're basically just liberals, right? Like, the Conservatives are off in fascist la-la land. The Liberals are basically Conservatives, right? And even further to the right than Stephen Harper's Conservatives, right? And then Jagmeet Singh is basically liberal, right? So we have no really leftist movement. And I suspect the Green Party, assuming Lascaris wins the leadership, will gain in support. So will the Communist Party. I heard that their membership is growing. I mean, one can hope. One can hope. I suspect Lascaris won't win the leadership. I don't think they'll allow it. Like, I truly believe that. Like, I don't believe that any of these elections are being legitimately wrong. Like, I don't buy that idea at all. Like, we're ruled by psychopaths. Like, I don't think that they're doing any of this legitimately. Why would we believe that? You know? If Dimitri wins, there will be a mass exodus of NDP to Green voters next election. Well, I mean, that's a nice idea, but I doubt it. Hey, pissed off. Thanks so much, bud. I appreciate that. Don't forget to hit that like button. Hit the like button. Hit the share. Do all the things. Hit all the bells. Hit all the whistles. Hit all the kind of stuff. Tell people I exist, right? Get more people in here. Like, this idea that the Greens will experience like a mass exodus of NDP to Green voters, I don't think so. I think most Canadians are just kind of gullible and complacent at this point. Like, really, like there's all the opportunity in the world to rebel against this system, and we're just not. Right? We're just not doing it. That really, I think most people have kind of put their head down and are just like, this is my life. I work this job, right? Show up on time, do the thing, right? Maybe I can do some kind of union thing or some kind of stuff like that. But like the concept that we could actually surround the halls of power and start actually threatening the power structure from without in serious ways, it's just not even on the table. Like we're not even close. And so all the capitalist class has to do is ensure that all the options are terrible. That's all. And so it's just controlled dissent from start to finish. And it doesn't matter who gets in, because at the end of the day, they're all going to basically do the same kind of shit. Meaning a weaker NDP, possibly a CPC majority. the CPC, I think, are like the last 3 elections have really shown that the CPC has capped that if they are going to make gains, and there are gains that they could make, those gains will be found in Ontario's 905. That the same kind of places where Doug Ford finds success. And the Conservatives of Canada really are, I actually think, the biggest mistakes that Andrew Scheer and O'Toole made in their election was not including Doug Ford more. That when they look at Doug Ford, they're like ashamed of him, which shows you their kind of liberal leaning and their liberal bent. That they themselves are actually kind of centrists and they want to pull the party closer to the center. But people actually vote for Doug Ford and like Doug Ford, right? And the people who like Doug Ford are conservative types, right? The types that say we should abandon the populace and spread suffering into the world, right? And that's called improving the place, right? That this idea that the actual appropriate thing to do is to destroy the community. Well, who's giving me $10? Watson, you brilliant boy. There's a river of blood that separates orthodox Marxism and Stalinism. Leon Trotsky, kinda. I mean, I think that's just the difference between theoreticizing and being an academic and being a leader of a country. Like, the harsh reality of being a leader of a country. I mean, find me one leader that doesn't end up in some kind of conflict for one reason or another, right? It's part of being a leader. The best I think that you can hope for as a leader of a country is that you're just defending yourself. That's, I think, the best that you can ever hope for. There's this one ruler that I every so often I dive into just random history, and there's this one French ruler in like the 10th century, and I really enjoyed him because his name was something like King Charles the Fat, right? It was like that. There was like a million King Charleses in France, and one of them was like King Charles the Fat. No, it wasn't King Charles. He was like Prince Charles the Fat. And he had control of like a small kind of vassal ship. And I was fascinated by him because it was very obvious that he really never wanted to go to war. Like he was against it by principle. He really never wanted to do it, and he was willing to capitulate a lot of personal power in order to have that assumed. And people around him thought that he was like lame and weak and stupid. He would lose like little parcels of land and like lose his own kind of personal prestige and all this kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, man, it would be great to be ruled by this guy, King Charles the Fat, or Prince Charles the Fat. I think that was his name. Because like, yeah, just never go to war. Like, how lovely. What a wonderful time in medieval Europe. Skippy Poilievre will deliver on the WEF plan. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, like, the Conservatives aren't hiding it. Like, they're not pretending like they're going to do something else. Like, which, again, I think that if the Conservatives were to start lying, the way that, like, Doug Ford does, right? Like, this is the thing that blows me away, and it ties back into what I was saying before. Like, they hid Doug Ford. No, they should have put Doug Ford right at the forefront. They should have campaigned with Doug Ford. They should have been going around Ontario with Doug Ford. Rah, big banners. And they should have been lying their faces off the whole time. Because that's how you become the leader of the country. You lie your face off. Right? Take a look at Trudeau. And Poilievre understands that, I think. Makes him very dangerous. If there ever was a time for Dmitry to be explosively loud, it would be right now. Dmitry, please announce something. We need grassroots activism to run out government, not WEF. Where is Elizabeth Rowley? Why doesn't she have an active Twitter or YouTube? Do I know who Elizabeth Rowley is? Why do I not know who this is? I feel like it's one of these things where I do. Oh, yes, of course. The leader of the Communist Party. Honestly, dude, if I had to be really straight with you, bud, about what's going on in this regard, like, how can I say this as nicely as I can? Elizabeth Rowley is of a generation that doesn't necessarily understand how social media or Twitter or YouTube even work. That's how I'll put it. I've organized with people of this generation, right? People like Elizabeth Rowley, right? I'm currently organizing with people like this. And it's pretty clear to me that there is a technology gap, that they are not understanding what is happening in that regard, and that they need assistance from people who are of the younger generation who understand what's going on. So why doesn't Elizabeth Rowley have like an active Twitter or YouTube? Probably because she doesn't know how, frankly. Like, wage stagnation 40 years, cost of living skyrocketing 40 years, climate collapsing 60 years, pandemic 2 years, warmongering 1 month. Yeah, economic, ecological collapse. Dental plan. Lisa needs braces. Dental plan. Half of Rockland Country, New York in 1939 wasn't even paying taxes because the millionaires and billionaires were already paying for them. Yeah, how wonderful. I wouldn't expect much firebrand Marxist rhetoric from a lawyer like Lascaris. He's still a petty bourgeoisie reformer. Yeah, Richard Wolff talks about the lesson of history of the New Deal years is that people in positions of power who have the resources and incentive to overturn everything were not removed. Yeah. I think we're still in the 100-year cycle of peasant revolts. Both capitalism and feudalism operate under hierarchy. Until we get rid of hierarchy and class privilege, we'll still be revolting 1,000 years from now. Yeah. John, have you read Sheldon Wollin's book, Democracy Incorporated, and his definition of inverted totalitarianism? I haven't read it, but I am familiar with the concept because I've encountered it from Chris Hedges quite a lot. And I've listened to a couple of lectures. I haven't read the book itself, though. But yeah, I think that's accurate. The inverted totalitarian system, right? That there is us, right? And then there's another group that exists on us, and the linchpin, right, is the political system, which has been completely co-opted by the billionaire class, right? They've bought it. Like, and there is no wresting it away from them through electoralism. Like, that's not going to happen. It's simply not. That if we were to manage to put forward enough force into our electoral system in order to create meaningful change, they would just do away with it. And I expect to see that. Like, I've got to be really clear. I've been saying this for a long time and all along, that like, we are going to live through a period of time where like American democracy is dismantled. You can see it happening. Like, the January 6th insurrection was a very serious moment. And there is a longing of a sorts within America to simply be done with this electoral system altogether. And to rule, like, the South used to be like a feudal structure. The Confederates were feudalists, right? Like, the feudalism has not like been gone for that long, right? Like, for goodness sakes, we still have like feudal monarchs who literally were feudal rulers still alive and walking around, right? Like the Queen of England, for Christ's sakes. Like Queen Elizabeth, she is literally a queen who had land, and she has been one of the she's a very transitionary figure because of the transition away from feudalism into capitalism, but like, she's still alive, for God's sakes. And so we're not that far out from feudalism. And because capitalism is a failed ideology that doesn't actually work, right? Except in terms of its ability to organize violence and theft. it's going to collapse, and it's not going to collapse into socialism, right? It's going to collapse back into feudalism, and it's really done has been just a rearranging of the monarchical class. That instead of the monarchies and the rulers being hereditary rulers of the old families, now it's going to be the Gates and the Bezoses and all this kind of stuff. So we created like a market random generation system of just like shaking it up, and then whatever families get pooped out of that become the new monarchy. That's essentially what's going on. So those dental care is only for the homeless? No. We'll see how it is. I suspect that the dental care that they'll bring in will be very similar to like Obamacare, right? It'll be some kind of capitulation to some kind of system, and they'll try to sell it to us as a big gain. But at the end of the day, it's like just going to be like a handout to corporate power again, right? Like they're running the same grifts on us over and over and over again, and we're just like swallowing it. We're just completely sucking it down. It is the height of stupidity to claim that men who for 1,000 years have had the power to berate us, to fleece us, and to oppress us with impunity will now agree with good grace to be our equals. Yeah, exactly. They enjoy to see them suffer, yeah? I think the mass peasant revolt should have happened in the 70s, or at least by '08, but the long-lived boomers are weighing the equation. When 90-year-olds can keep power, there's no hope for the young. Yeah. And I mean, you can see that the liberals are aware of this dynamic, right? The liberals do actually improve the quality of life for one group of people, and it's the boomers, right? Like what they'll increase the amount of the old age security pension, right? I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but like so if you're an old boomer, you're like, oh, okay, cool, liberal, check, right? Meanwhile, like the next generation is literally being abandoned. Like, it couldn't be a harsher abandonment. Would be restricted to families with an income of less than $90,000 annually, with co-pays for anyone under 70 annual. The plan is kids 12 and under 2022, 18 and under seniors and disabled, full coverage for all by 2025. But of course, we are at war on the precipice of austerity if Trudeau can survive till 2025. I mean, I think it's just bullshit. Right? Like, I think the game for the death cult at this point is to try to keep this kind of fake bullshit going all along. Like, I don't believe for a minute that we're actually going to get dental coverage. They're attempting to privatize this system, right? Like, they're attempting to privatize the healthcare system. They're doing it directly in front of your eyes, and they're not being quiet about it. Like, it's obvious that they're doing it. Like, Doug Ford is actively pursuing it. Kenny was actively pursuing it. Like, the conservatives, it's part of their policy planks. And the liberals are not really preventing it from occurring. They're not. They only really get outspoken about it during election period. But then they cut these programs too. So this idea that they're actually going to erect some kind of nationalized dental coverage system, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. Like, I think that they're just walking us down the garden path, like they did with climate change, right? Like they did with climate change, right? Climate change is an emergency. We're gonna ban straws about it. Like, literally buying pipelines, right? Ramping up production. Like, it's you've got to be kind of gullible at this point to actually think that this is serious, right? I'll believe it when I see it. Like, and even then, I'm going to be very skeptical of it because I don't think for a second that this is legitimate. When have these guys ever told us the truth about anything? When have they ever actually delivered on anything that they've ever said that they were going to do? Like, literally the only thing they've ever delivered on was just legalizing marijuana, and that was like a one-liner. Like, literally just like, marijuana is legal now. Pass. Like, what have they delivered on? Genuinely. Like, nothing. And the COVID period was perfect for them. Like, they got to do basically nothing for 2 years. And we all just kind of were like, oh, okay. Like, well, it's a serious situation. Someone needs to oversee it. And that's basically what they did. They, like, past the Serb, took them a day to do, right? And then anytime they need to plan or get anything together, they basically just steadily dismantle that system, right? And now it's dismantled and it's done. So they put more work into dismantling it than they've put into anything else, right? And we're all just like, yeah, they're serious when they say they're actually going to put in some kind of... Just wait till 2025, you guys. Just wait till 2025, right? Hey, we're going to pass a dental care system. Everybody just go to sleep. Don't pay attention. Don't revolt. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Look, the good things are coming. It's going to be 3 years from now. You're going to be like, boy, howdy, am I ever glad that we didn't take to the streets and surround the halls of power and get rid of these fucking psychopaths then, right? And then 2025 is going to roll around, and guess what? They're going to be like, oh, we were thinking about it, and, the unforeseen difficulties, all that kind of stuff, which is exactly what they've done with pharmacare, which is exactly what they've done with things like the basic income. It's always just kick the can down the road. And this is going to be the same. I think it's going to be the same, right? And the NDP know it. Like, the NDP know it. Like, they're not a serious party. Like, Jagmeet Singh is not a serious person. Right? Like, he's happy, he's the liberal, he's the orange liberal, right? He's just happy to be the leader of the NDP. He doesn't actually care. Well, in fact, it's not up to Canadians. That's the beauty of bourgeoisie politics. When the ruling class gets sick of Trudeau, they'll end his political career, yeah? Is this law came into play now, or is a bill being passed through the House now? Incidentally, let's spend a little bit of time. Be like, thanks for the money, guys. That's nice. Isn't that nice? What a wonderful donation. This little button. I'm so happy this little button's here now. So it's so nice when people do that. Ex-police chief Saunders running in Wynn's old seat. Yeah. Jeff Bezos knows fully well what he's doing. When he said he went to space, he didn't say, I individualized my individualism and bootstraps and I paid for this. Yeah. He turned to his workers and said, you paid for this. Yeah. Was it Charles the Confessor? No. I think it might not be a Charles. I'm just messing up the name. And I think I'm confusing him with King Charles the Simple, who I really liked. King Charles the Simple. King Charles the Simple was great. King Charles the Simple, he was called the Simple not because he was stupid, but because he always had simple solutions to problems. And so one of the problems that France had on the regular was that Vikings would raid the coastline, right? And the game was that the Vikings would show up on the coastline and they would seize the territory, and then they would ransom the territory back to the king, and they would take the treasure and all that kind of stuff, and they would take off, and that would be the thing that spurned their economy or moved them forward, right? And so then one year they show up and they say, "Ha, we've seized the territory like we always do. Ransom it back to us, king." And King Charles the Simple goes, "Nah. You can have it," right? Because they've been doing it so often that it's not really like usable so much, right? Like people are expecting these Vikings to show up, and they're expecting them to raid this territory, so they're not really developing it, right? And King Charles the Simple says to the Vikings, like, "Nah, that's okay. You can keep it. You can just have that land." And the Vikings, of course, are like, what? This is not what we expected whatsoever. And we actually don't know what we're doing with this. Like, we're not agriculturalists or anything. Like, we don't know what we're doing. And the people of France who lived in these regions, you would think that they would be up in arms about this, that they'd be like, "You've capitulated this land." But because these Vikings had raided this territory so often, the people of that region had actually gotten to know who these guys were, right? And so basically these guys landed in, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's Eric and they're Victor or whoever," right? And, "Oh hey, how you guys doing? Yeah, oh, you're here for the plunder? Yeah, we got it ready for you," right? Like that kind of thing. And so what happens is that these Vikings settle this territory, and the people of France actually work with them to help them learn agriculture and become part of the larger French culture. These become the Norse, who, the Normans, who, is that right? I think I'm fucking up the name. But they become the largest defenders of raids in the future. And so dedicated was King Charles to this idea that this is how we're gonna follow through on this, that he had the war chief meet, and he had to pledge fealty in order to get the land and all this kind of stuff, and which the Viking guy did. But then he stood up and he kicked King Charles' throne over and sent Charles ass over tea kettle, which is an act of aggression, and he sort of expected this to become a fight. And then King Charles, as the story goes, he got up from his chair. He said, "Okay, great, we did it. Thanks." Right? Just brushed it off. Didn't make a deal of it at all. It was just like, "Oh, that's just a spot of fun. Okay, great. Enjoy your land." And I'm just like, what a wonderful story. What a wonderful story where the king didn't get all huffy about it. He didn't get all, "We got to fight to the last man," or any of this kind of stuff. He literally looked at it and was just like, I bet you if I just gave him that land, everything would be fine. And it totally was. It completely was. They integrated into the society. They married into the society. They learned how to do agriculture, and then they became one of the great defenders of France. See, that's just a little bit of just maybe we shouldn't hate these guys. Maybe we shouldn't hate them. Maybe we should actually say "Oh, what a ridiculous situation they find themselves in," and we could do war or just not. Right? So one of the lessons of my life is just most times if you just decide not to do the war, it's usually better. He's just evil, wants to destroy everything that's good in this world. Well, and it's all built around this ethos of if you're poor, it's your fault, right? The PC Party of Ontario got forward in a position of power by ginning up a sex scandal on Patrick Brown. Yes, which has been shown to be not accurately reported as well. That came out quite recently, if I recall, that Patrick Brown has been vindicated to some degree. Born 1949, yeah, people who are expecting this person to be on social media are not being realistic. Yeah, I think that's right. And I communicate all the time with people who are really struggling with the idea of even texting, right? Very simple stuff. Now, I am expecting Daniel to show up. We'll see if he is going to show up. Maybe he's going to show up at 8. Where Daniel from the Red Review is going to be on today. And we're going to be talking to him about all the nuttiness that's going on in the world. And it'd be nice to get another perspective into the story. While we surely are veering towards an updated form of fascism, of course, the positive of this is that when we see this happening, it's not out of a position of strength. It's because of ruling class weakness. Yeah, I think they are weak. This is the thing that's so funny to me. I really do think, if we actually started to surround the halls of power, they'd have to respond because they're so fucking weak, right? Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, published on September 27, 1962, documenting the adverse environmental effects caused by the indiscriminate use of pesticides. Alexa, play Inside Out Traveling Wilburys. Oh, yeah. If they're serious, they do it now, the dental program, yeah. Yeah, but they're not serious. They're not. $12.79, you can get a 4-piece double fry and a Pepsi at KFC now. Fantastic. The Normans of northern France were the remnants of the Vikings who civilized the Angles and Jutes in England. William the Conqueror was a Norman. Dude, William the Conqueror is one of those really crazy moments in British history where there were actually 3 different rulers vying for control. And I forget all of their names. But it really was hereditary monarch, right? The populist everybody liked. And then William the Conqueror. And William the Conqueror manages to win. But it was a very close victory. And it could have gone the other way. And it was one of those kind of turning point moments that people look at and be like, oh yeah, if this battle have gone in this direction instead of this direction, then you'd have a different ruler. And the history of England would have moved forward in a very different way. Because, William the Conqueror wasn't necessarily a nice ruler, right? When you've got a name like William the Conqueror, right? Like, you're not exactly a nice guy, I don't think. Like, it's like if you have the name Vlad the Impaler, you know? Sets an expectation. I think people know what it is they're getting into. So, let's not ignore. So I do want to report on this because I've because of the fog of war in Ukraine, the story that of the Canadian sniper who showed up and was shot 20 minutes in has proven to be false. Canadian sniper Wally alive in Ukraine tells Quebec La Presse he was the last to learn of his own death. Right? So this guy showed up and he's been operating on the front lines. I'm alive. Combats were intense. We took ground from the enemy. And so I want to do my due diligence. I reported on something as if it was a fact because that's what I was hearing. But that's the fog of war, right? Again, it's everyone is incentivized to lie, right? And I've said it several times, and I'll reiterate it. Not only is everyone incentivized to lie, everyone is correct to lie. In a war situation, deception, right? What is it? Deception is the greater part of valor. You should lie if you are in war, for sure. And it's a big reason why I don't really like reporting on certain things, but I did report on this. And so I'm recanting. I'm repenting. I'm taking my, I'm doing my due diligence. The Canadian sniper, alive. And this, in fact, I think increases his profile and increases his legend, right? He has returned from the dead. He was actually known as William the Bastard before the conquest. See, if you got a name like that, this guy was like from the outset, right? Like nobody's like if you're doing what William's doing, nobody's called William the nice guy. Yeah, there you go. Who would that be for a ruler? Like William the Nice. I learned Essence of Time had a combat unit in Donbass. All right. When your opponent is making a mistake, don't interrupt them. Yeah, absolutely. Surging food, gas prices, dwarf Bank of Canada hike impact. That's from the National Bank. Like, this issue is not getting resolved because they're not actually taking seriously what the problem actually is. Right? Like, the problem is that they printed a bunch of money. Like, that's what the problem is. Right? And if you've printed a bunch of money and you want to avoid inflation, well, then you need to tax a bunch of money away. Right? Well, we know where that money went. Right? The corporate owners have been making money hand over fist. The largest gains they've ever made. So there's all this pools of dead capital just sitting around. We know what should be done. Right? You tax that wealth away. That'll balance out your system, de-inflate the economy. But they're not going to do that. Right? They're not interested. One English monarch was called Aethelred the Unready. Dude, that is an unfortunate. How do you end up with this name? His epithet does not derive from the modern word unready, but rather from the Old English meaning poorly advised. It's a pun on his name, which means well advised. Well, that's fun. That's fun as hell. His name means well advised, and so they call him well advised the unadvised or the poorly advised. That's so funny, dude. How do you get this name? Chief problem was his conflict with the Danes. They raided, becoming more seriously. Following the battle, he paid tribute to the Danish king, so he loses. And then he ordered what became known as the St. Brice's Day Massacre of Danish settlers. He invaded England. As a result, he fled to Normandy and was replaced by Swen. He returned after that person died, but then he died just 2 years later. His 37 combined reign was the longest of any Anglo-Saxon English king, and was only surpassed in the 13th century, so like 300 years later, by Henry III. That's hilarious, dude. His notorious is commonly translated. How'd he get it? Because the nickname was first recorded more than 150 years after his death, it's doubtful it carries any implications as to the reputation of the king in the eyes of his contemporaries or near contemporaries. Okay. So, like, it could have simply not even been the nickname that he had when he was alive. That it just, for all we know, it's some monk who just wrote it down thinking, like, that's very clever. But a possible dental plan. Yeah, right. Like, I'm just so fucking over it, dude. Thomas Jefferson was the 18 greats grandson of William the Conqueror. That makes sense. Right? But yeah, it's your own individual effort, right? You're like, your familial bloodline doesn't have anything to do with it. Nah. Most nicknames of early medieval monarchs are like that. Well, I mean, lots of things are like that. The belief that the medieval people believed that the earth was flat, right? Like this idea that, a medieval peasant thought the earth was flat. But that's like propaganda that was created later. I don't exactly remember why they were incentivized to propagandize in such a way to try to convince people that like medieval people thought the earth was flat. But that it's pretty likely that medieval people were like, no, the earth's round. Right? Like we're peasants, we're not idiots. Possibly including Charles the Fat and other such things. Gregory the Flatulent, amazing. My favorite is when you find out stuff like Charles the Fat. Like you said before, like Charles the Bald wasn't bald. And Charles the Fat's not fat, right? That there's like all of these like... They end up just being nicknames that are given like posthumously in order to like make fun of somebody's reign, you know? Or make fun of an individual. Like, or their bloodline or whatever, you know? Like, that's, it's like petty bullshit. So I wanted to play... We do have to do a bit of an update on what's going on. We have military situation in eastern Ukraine on March 21st. So this is yesterday's news, but it's the nearest thing we've got. Because of the nature of how the conflict is going, as you can see, right? Like, this is more or less the degree to which Russia is going to take territory, I think. That they have said outright that they're not really interested to push into the interior because the interior is where the planting is, and there's an enormous amount of, like, Ukraine produces an enormous amount of wheat. Right, it's an enormous agricultural producer. And the Russians don't want to interfere with that. They don't also want this to result in a famine, is what it really comes down to, right? So people are saying like, well, why aren't they pushing into the interior? It's because they don't want to interrupt the agricultural growing season that is upon us, right? Like it's coming in right now. Right? So the last thing they want to do is drive tanks through fields and destroy agricultural land and interrupt the proceeding of agriculture in the area. And so they're trying to keep the fighting to where it needs to be. And right now that's in the cities. As you can see, Lugansk has been completely surrounded and Lugansk has fallen to the Russians. Donetsk is still a bit of a battleground that I've been hearing. And as you see here, the real fight, the real fights that are going on are going to be Kiev itself, Kharkiv, you can see here, right? A pretty big offensive happening here. And then Mariupol. Mariupol is a holdout because of the Nazis, right? Some of the most brutal shit that you're hearing coming out of this conflict is coming out of this region. Right, you've got people fleeing from this, and the stories that they are telling, it confirms the stories that have been coming out of people like Russell Bentley and Patrick Lancaster and Scott Ritter, that the Nazis are basically taking hostages. They're using people as human shields. That the Russians are doing everything they can to sort of alleviate this, but they're dealing with Nazis, And let's take a moment here. This is a bit propagandistic, so expect that. Don't bullshit ourselves, right? But this is one of the most comprehensive videos that I've seen on the subject. So I'm going to play it right here. Also, you know it's serious when you got this like.
The Russian military and the forces of the Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, and the Lugansk People's Republic, LPR, have concluded Day 25 of their special military operation against the armed forces of Ukraine, AFU, with several gains, mainly in the Donbas region. The city of Mariupol remains the center of events. As of March 20th, fierce street fighting continues in the city of Mariupol. Units of the Russian armed forces and the DPR developed their advance in the city with fire support from Russian Navy warships. The grouping of AFU troops, nationalist forces, and foreign mercenaries encircled there is gradually being destroyed. In a last attempt to spare the city any further destruction, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that it will open humanitarian corridors in the eastern and western directions of the city from the morning of March 21st. Russian forces will give AFU troops, nationalist forces, and foreign mercenaries a possibility to leave Mariupol unharmed via humanitarian corridors. Meanwhile, in the western and southern parts of the Donetsk region, Russian and DPR forces continue to advance to the west of Volnovka. The village of Stepnoye was reportedly captured. Intense clashes continued in the vicinity of Marinka and Avdiivka. Russian and DPR forces also advanced 12 kilometers and reached the Nikolska line. The settlement of Sladkoe was blocked from three sides by the joint forces. Work is currently underway to eliminate the remnants of nationalist formations and the 54th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the AFU in the settlements of Sladkoe, Novakarinka, and Shlaterskoe. DPR forces are pursuing the retreating units of the 53rd Mechanized Brigade of the AFU in the direction of the settlement of Novomikhailovka. At the same time, the forces penetrated the defense of the AFU's 25th Airborne Brigade and reached the settlements of Kamyunka and Novoslavovka too. Meanwhile, in the Kharkiv region, the area of Izium is the main hot point. Fighting continues near Kaminka to the south of it. Russian and LPR forces are working to eliminate the defense of AFU troops there to open the door for an advance on Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. In the region of Kherson, the situation is under complete control. The region has become a logistical hub for the group of Russians involved in both operations around Mariupol and Mykolaiv. The road from Crimea to Kherson City has been fully secured by Russian forces. In the region of Mykolaiv, Russian troops tighten their siege on the provincial capital by expanding their zone of control around it and establishing strong points in such areas such as Pervomaiske and Sinigorivka. Meanwhile, in the regions of Cherniv and Sumy in northern Ukraine, the military situation remained almost the same. All the large cities are besieged by the Russian military that does not appear to be planning to storm them anytime soon. On the western front of the Ukrainian capital Kiev, Russian forces continue to expand their zone of control. Russian forces have been gradually advancing towards the towns of Makarov, Belgorodka, and Bishev. Russian forces also conducted security operations in the already liberated villages and towns there. The Russian military continues to carry out precision strikes on high-value military targets in Ukraine. On March 20th, fresh strikes on military infrastructure facilities in Ukraine were carried out. A high-precision air-launched missile hit the training center for Special Operations Forces of the AFU where foreign mercenaries were based. The strike on the base near the settlement of Ovruch in the Zhytomyr region eliminated more than 100 members of pro-Kiev forces. Furthermore, a salvo of Karabir cruise missiles from the Black Sea hit the Nezhin repair plant and destroyed workshops for the repair of Ukrainian armored vehicles damaged in the hostilities. Another strike with caliber missiles from the Caspian Sea and hypersonic aeroballistic missiles Kinzhal from the airspace over the territory of Crimea destroyed a large base for storing fuel and lubricants of the Ukrainian armed forces near the village of Konstantinovka in the Mykolaiv region. This base was used for supplies of fuel for Ukrainian armored vehicles in the combat areas in southern Ukraine. According to the most recent briefing by the Russian Ministry of Defense, since the start of the special military operation in Ukraine, 214 drones, 1,483 battle tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 150 warplanes, 584 field artillery and mortar weapons, and 1,279 units of special military equipment were destroyed. The city of Mariupol will likely remain the focus of Russian military operations in Ukraine for the upcoming few days. Once the city is captured by Russian forces, the other fronts in Donbass will likely see more intensive operations. Kiev's forces to the east of the Dnieper River may end up getting besieged within a few weeks.
Pretty rad. Pretty rad. I mean, it really does give lie to the Western narrative, which is that the reason why, like they've been saying that, it's the Ukrainians have fought back and they've slowed things down. The Russians are just slow and steady, man. Slow and steady wins the race, right? They're not really in a rush. They're not really that keen to destroy the place, if you ask me, right? Like, I think that if they wanted to just flatten Ukraine, they could have done it, right? But they're not. Like, they're not actively flattening it to the ground the way that, like, the Americans would, right? And it's the same narrative that we're seeing over and over again, right? They don't want to just overtly destroy all of the infrastructure. They don't want to. They see Ukraine as part of what it is. This of course comes out of Jen Zedong. That's a subreddit. I'm hoping that they don't get disbanded or banned or any of that kind of stuff. Lots of useful stuff comes through here. This is on a new platform called Odyssey. Louis the Do Nothing. That's funny, dude. That's funny. Greek Militant Workers Front calls for nationwide strike. It's what needs to start happening, right? It's what needs to start happening. Like stop participating in this nightmare that we're all just driving ourselves towards, right? We're all just deciding to blow the planet up, and like that's normal. I'm forever and eternally shocked at how normalized that's all become. Heated lots? I love this. Louis the Do Nothing was a king of West Francia. During his reign, the nobility essentially ruled. Dying childless, he was the last Carolingian monarch. So, like, yeah, it looks like he just, upon his father's death, the already crowned became the undisputed king. At that time, however, there existed in the Frankish court two factions. One led by the Archbishop Adalberam of Reims and Queen Emma, who, being strongly influenced by her mother, Empress Adelaide, wanted the renewal of friendly relationships with the Ottonian dynasty. The other faction wanted to continue Lothair's policy and take. Isn't this shit just fucking fascinating? This is fascinating shit, if you ask me, man. Like medieval politics, dude. Here is my relationship with TikTok. I put up one video, they suspend me. Like that's and literally my videos are like 10 seconds long, and it's me saying like liberals are doing this. Isn't that great? Like, literally, like TikTok is not like, it's gonna be like basically just people telling stupid jokes and women shaking their booties. That's what it is. That like, if you want to see like 30-second clips of somebody playing like a video game or something, some cosplayer being like, here's me normally, and then I'm a cosplay, right? Like you TikTok. Fantastic. But if you do any kind of political commentary whatsoever that's at all controversial, but it's so odd because it's just like some people, like I know people who are on TikTok. Like I know people who do political stuff on TikTok, and they're not getting banned. They're not getting all this kind of stuff. And I think it's because their stuff is completely non-controversial, right? Like they're not actually saying anything about the power structure that is meaningful or scary at all. One prediction I've heard that most of the fighting in the east of the country is expected to be over by mid-April, but we should be careful with predictions. Yeah, nobody knows what time schedule other than the Russians. They are tight-lipped. Well, and you know, it's how many bullets can the Ukrainians keep, and there isn't really like it's all going to be like, you know, you can't pinpoint it. It's going to happen when it happens. And to me, I've been saying recently that one of the things I never hear anybody talk about, but I've kind of been thinking about it. And so this isn't like, I don't have like a source document. There isn't like a military general who has said this. This is just me, and this is largely speculative. So I want to really, really put that out there when I say this, that I think that this here, Mariupol, is probably the largest part of the conflict, and I think that that's the case because that's where the bulk of the Nazis are. And the more I kind of contemplate on it, the more I think that the Nazis aren't listening to anybody. Like, they're not in control. That they don't listen to the Ukrainian government. They don't listen to NATO. They only listen to themselves. And they are going to fight to the last man. And so politically, the Ukrainians and NATO and all of these, they can't back down. They can't negotiate peace. They can't capitulate because the Nazis aren't going to surrender. I think that's what's happening. That until the Nazis are actually destroyed, until that contingent of the military is actually routed out completely, and this conflict in Mariupol is actually completed, I don't think the war can come to a close. And as we just heard in the video that we just played, there's not a lot of action happening in the north, right? Like, the Russians aren't feeling the need to push in too heavily into Kiev or into Kharkov or any of that kind of stuff. Like, they're steadily moving in, but they're not really like pressing in. There isn't like a fearsome pace to what they're doing, right? And along this line, it seems very slow and steady wins the race, like steadily taking over territory, fighting against the regular military forces. Mariupol, though, is where the Nazis are, right? The Azov Battalion is based in Mariupol, right? And so I actually do think that this is the whole story. And I think it really is, and again, purely speculative, as somebody who's just trying to make sense of what's going on. I think it really is just that the Nazis they're not going to negotiate. Like, they're not going to surrender, you know? That if they were a traditional military force that was listening to Ukrainian command and was listening to and was actually part of the power structure in a more serious way, and actually would say, okay, we've been given the surrender order, put down your arms, follow the leadership, all of that kind of stuff, I think this conflict would probably already have been declared over, right? Because it is. Like, the Ukrainians can't possibly win, right? It's literally an impossibility. Like, you're talking about, like, they're running out of goods, they're running out of weapons, they're running out of ammunition, right? Once you're out of ammunition, you're done. Like, you're done. And this idea that the Russian, like, I've seen YouTube videos and stuff on social media and stuff even on corporate American where they're like, will the Russian economy be able to with it? The Russians defeated Hitler's Nazis. Shut the fuck up. They absolutely have the economic strength. They absolutely have the economic power to be able to win this. Like, this idea that the Ukrainians are actually going to put up a fight to be able to actually like get the fuck right out of here with that. It's so baby brained, like, it's so stupid to believe that the nation that not that long ago literally defeated an industrialized like an industrialized Nazi fucking tank force that were using things like the Blitzkrieg and all this kind of shit. And you're worried about, like, what? Like, this ragtag band? Like, they're already surrounded. The supply lines coming in from Moscow into this area are tight. Like, there's no interruptions. Like, there's no forces interrupting these supply lines. Like, and meanwhile the Ukrainians are receiving nothing, right? Like, and so once Mariupol falls, I think that might be it. Speculation. I am not a prophet. I don't know all things. I am not in the mind of Zelensky. But if I look at the situation and think, why are these guys not surrendering? Right? Like, at this point, they're just killing Ukrainians. Like, that's it. Like, if you're Zelensky, you're just killing Ukrainians. Like, that's all that's happening here. You're not winning anything. And in fact, every day that moves forward, you lose leverage, right? If you're Zelensky, that right now, if he were to sue for peace, he might be able to get certain concessions, or he might be able to get certain things. But every day that passes, he loses leverage, and eventually, the Russians are going to be able to say, "This is what's happening. Deal with it," and that's just there, and they're going to have to, right? And so this idea that they're like, what are they holding out for? Like, what are they actually holding out for? What are they gaining by holding out? Because they're not gaining anything by holding out, right? The Americans aren't coming. The Europeans aren't coming, right? Like, the opportunity to actually form a counteroffensive has come and gone. Like, they're not going to do it, right? And so the only thing that I can put together is just that they don't want to surrender because they know that this force, the Azov battalion, is not going to surrender. And if they surrender and then these guys keep fighting, it's really going to out them, right? It's going to show that they never had control of the situation in the first place, right? Like, that's been part of the narrative in Ukraine, right? Stand with Ukraine, right? Zelensky's a king, right? He's a prince. Like, we all love Zelensky, all this kind of stuff. Zelensky's not in control. He's not in control of the situation. And if he were to declare surrender and then the military kept fighting, really show you who is actually in control. And if it turns out that the people who are actually in control and are actually making the decisions turn out to be fucking Nazis, well, that'd be a big fucking problem, I think, for the narrative that comes out of Ukraine. The idea seems to be when the bulk of the encircled Donbass force and the main three Azov strongholds in the east are done, Mariupol, Kharkov, and Odessa, Kiev will have to come to terms. Yeah, I think that's more or less a restatement of what I've been saying, right? Like, it's like Zelensky doesn't actually have control, right? Like, so he can't declare a surrender because it would be an embarrassment for him. He would embarrass himself doing it, right? And show the international community all of these stand with Ukraine stands, right? Well, he would declare surrender and then the fighting would continue and people would be like, well, wait a minute. Did he ever have control? And the answer is, of course, no. He's a fucking nightclub comedian. Who gives a shit about this guy? Yeah, and we don't actually know what the Russian strategy is. We can only infer from the available information. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the Russians themselves have made several statements, like the criticism that comes out of the West of like, oh, they're not going into the interior. Well, I mean, the Russian state itself has said like, yeah, it's agricultural land. Like we don't want to interrupt this. Like, we don't want to create a famine. We're not interested in that. Hey, you see that little bit of land between Poland and Lithuania? That's a portion of what's left of East Prussia. Poland and Lithuania. Are you talking about this right here? This right here is technically Russian land, right? One of the big critiques that people have made about the narrative of NATO encroachment is they've said, well, that's bullshit, isn't it? Because Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all part of NATO, right? So it's like, oh, it's total bullshit. They're not worried about encroachment. Look, it's on their border and everything and all that kind of stuff. But because of this piece of land right here that Russia actually owns, if NATO were to actually try to take advantage of this and move troops in, well, they could just move in from Belarus and cut it off and just be like, snip. So any troop movement that comes through here is actually not good for NATO. It's not a good strategic option for NATO to pursue that line because it can be cut off so easily. The Russians have had at least 8 years to plan for all of this. Yeah. No, I mean, like, they know what's up. Oh, you guys. You guys are all about this number draw, dude. I always forget. I've been forgetting a lot. Wow, 17 people are watching me right now? Amazing. How you all doing out there, guys? I hope you guys are doing great. Honestly, man, I have not been sleeping. I've not been sleeping at all. I gotta do something about that. I gotta do something about that. Because, like, yeah, okay, you guys are picking numbers. I'll talk about this later. I'm sticking with my 10. I'm sticking with my 10.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go.
It's March 22,
We got 7.
2022.
We got 4. We got 2 6s, 2 3s, an
10
8,
balls.
a 4, 2 4s.
Each ball has a number.
It's gonna be a 2. You watch. There's so many
Numbers
like pairs.
1 through
It's gonna be a
10.
2 now. So I'm feeling it.
Swirl the numbers.
I'm staying with my 10, but it's gonna be a 2. Rusty in with a 3.
Pick a number.
Oh, you guys are tipping it in the other direction. Now it's got to be a 3, right?
Today's
Here we go.
number is
2. Hey! I said 2, but I remember I said several times I was sticking with 10. I shouldn't do that. I can't pick 2 numbers like that. What an asshole! What an asshole! Tarnishes my victory is what it does. Tarnishes my victory. It's you know what? I'm still gonna count it. I'm still gonna count it. You know, and this is exactly what I needed right now. This is exactly what I needed. I needed the energy of David Lynch to come in, lift me up into the world, remind me that there's like a sparkling, angelic fairy type critter out in the world, saying the most beautiful and absurd things, making art that is just abstract and strange and weird, like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is just absolutely wild, man. Like, if you want to see something glorious and beautiful in a way, you go and watch Twin Peaks. Because Twin Peaks was like the precursor to X-Files. And then right when the show was starting to go into like real supernatural shit, it gets canceled. For all of the bullshit reasons that shows like this get canceled, right? And it had like a real cult following, and that cult following kind of followed through into X-Files. And then literally, was it 20 years? I think it was. 20 years later, they put together, they get the cast and they reunite the cast, and David Lynch comes and they do another season. 20 years later. And everyone was super hype about this. Like, the fan base was super hype, and David Lynch delivers something that you can only describe as strange and unexplainable, like just odd, like supernatural, but like explicitly. It was David Lynch. That's all. It was Lynchian. That's the only way to describe it. Like, David Lynch, one of his most famous sort of positions is that you don't owe the audience any explanation. Like, he really believed in that kind of shit, which is why like the stuff that he did was always very unusual and abstract and strange. And whenever he was sort of tasked to do more conventional stuff, it always kind of sucked. It just didn't work. Like, David Lynch was the director of the 1980s version of Dune, right? Which even he said he didn't really have a handle on, right? Like, David Lynch is not supposed to be making like big blockbuster, big Hollywood movies like that. That's not who he is. It's not how he rolls, right? And yeah, and he's like Blue Velvet, yeah, Eraserhead, like it's Mulholland Drive, like. He's an unusual character, and my absolute favorite thing that he does is he'll make these big statements and then not back them up with anything, right? And refuse. Like one of his most famous moments. You know, the funny thing about God is that he's gay. Can you expound on that? No. David Lynch, man. What a fucking character. David Lynch. is it called bibliography? No, not not books. Oh my God, what am I doing? Movies, movie list. Filmography, of course it's filmography. What am I doing? Eraserhead, The Elephant Man, Dune, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, Lost Highway, The Straight Story, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire. 6 Men Getting Sick. What did you say? Naked Lunch? No, I don't think so, bud. Who was the director of Naked Lunch? Cronenberg. David Cronenberg. Yeah, I can see how you could get those two confused, for sure. I don't know that much about Cronenberg, but Cronenberg is notorious in his own right. What did Cronenberg do that has everybody like? Filmography. Stereo Crimes, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners. There's a good one. The Fly for sure. Oh, he did Existenz. No kidding, eh? This was an oddball film, man. This is an oddball film. I actually think that this film might have just been too early. You know what I mean? Like, I think that Existenz is one of these films that, like, didn't actually, like, it was just too early. It just came along. If it were to have come out around the same time as, like, The Matrix, I think it probably would have done a lot better. Just a little early. And all the rest of these, I have no Crimes of the Future. Like, what are you talking about? Newton. I have been hearing. I'm waiting for the second film to come out because I don't trust these filmmakers anymore to actually deliver, and so I'm. You know who I am really looking forward to seeing more stuff out of is what's his name? Del Toro. Del Toro has been oddly quiet recently. And filmography, here we go. Pinocchio. No shit, eh? No fucking shit at all. You gotta be kidding me. Like, this guy back in 2006, right? Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth was just a great film, man. Like, it really was. It was like a really, really, like, simultaneously creepy but also whimsical. Like, he manages to put together all of these really disparate elements in his, I haven't seen Existence in such a long time, but I'd believe it. Inception wasn't that good a movie, right? It really wasn't. Like, everybody acted like Inception was like this really complex, difficult to understand. It's not complex at all. Like, it's not complex at all. Like, you can go into someone's subconscious, and then you can go deeper into their subconscious level by level by level. And then you pull yourself out of it by jarring yourself. Like, that's not hard to follow. Like, everybody that's walking around being like, wow, it's so difficult. I'm like, really? The only interesting thing that happened in Inception was literally the last moment. If you know what I'm talking, the top. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. That's literally the only thing that was interesting in that movie. Everything else was just like kind of boilerplate, frankly. And the whole movie was basically them just walking around explaining the movie. And I was like, I actually think Inception would have been way more interesting if it had been directed by someone like David Lynch, right? Because David Lynch would have looked at that script and been like, why are they explaining everything? Get rid of all this explanation. And people would have been like, won't people be confused? And Lynch would have been like, probably. That's what I love about Lynch, man. He would have taken a script like Inception, and he would have just been he would have been like, so he goes into the subconscious, and then they go deeper in the subconscious, and then he goes down to the deepest level of the subconscious, and then he gets pulled out of the subconscious all at once. But is he out? Who knows? And people will be like, how will the audience understand that? And he'd look at them and be like, I don't care. Inception by David Lynch would have been a much better film. Like, I remember being in the theater and just being like, what's the fuck? Who cares about this film? Like, I don't understand why and like the blaring, like every time. South Park really took the piss out of Inception with this, where they did like an Inception episode, and anytime like a horn would play, they'd just like pull the tail of a sheep, and the sheep would be like, ah! Kind of like a Dark Souls game. I actually think, I was just about to say this, Eric. That's funny that you said that, because I was just about to say that I think that that Dark Souls and this new Elden Ring, I'm super deep into Elden Ring, you guys. Like, I'm way too deep into Elden Ring. Like, I'm basically, if I'm not recording an audiobook, and if I'm not doing this channel, and if I'm not researching for this, I'm playing Elden Ring. That's where I'm at right now. And I really do think that Del Toro's work is infused very much into Dark Souls. I think Dark Souls, like, when does Dark Souls come out? Dark Souls 1 released. Yeah, 2011, right? Pan's Labyrinth was 2006, right? And I think that Pan's Labyrinth has really, like, echoed into a lot of film and a lot of video games, especially, specifically Dark Souls. I think Dark Souls really took a look at what Pan's Labyrinth put to the table, which was this idea of something that's simultaneous, like it's whimsy distorted, right? It's still mystical and magical and odd and strange and beautiful, but also horrifying and creepy. And Del Toro really, with Pan's Labyrinth, put some, and the fact that the protagonist in Pan's Labyrinth was a child, really gave it this like very, very innocent but also very scary perspective, because she is so vulnerable. Like, she's so like, if something goes wrong, what's she gonna do about it, right? Like, she's toast if something goes wrong. And so it really heightened the threat of the whole piece. And you were dogging on the Soul series a couple of weeks ago. Welcome to it, comrade. You know what the big difference is, dude? The big difference. And I will still dog on the Dark Souls series. I think that the Dark Souls series is mainly annoying. Like, straight up. Like, I think it's mainly annoying. Like, and every single time you're playing a Dark Souls game, you're basically just dude with stick. Like, it's the only way to play the game. Like, you're dude with stick, shield stick. The thing that really, like, made me turn the corner on Elden Ring specifically was that they obviously were like, we want to make a game where there's magic. We want magic in this game. And the Dark Souls series was always very much like, no, like, magic, no, we're not going to do magic. Magic seems too strong or too scary, and we don't know how to do it. And Elden Ring is very much like, no, magic. Magic is cool. Do magic. Like, fuck this idea that magic has got to be, like, limited and constricted and difficult and specific and all this kind of stuff. Like, I'm literally playing a wizard in Elden Ring, and I'm having a great time. I'm having a fucking great time. Because the thing that's really beautiful about Elden Ring specifically, and, like, which, again, I think does separate it from the Dark Souls series as well. Like, Dark Souls is fairly linear, if you ask me. Like, there's an objective, get to the bell tower, right? Like, go up this path. Like, there might be small divergence, but for the most part, you're just kind of walking in a direction, right? Whereas Elden Ring is very much like, hey, welcome. Where do you want to go? Over there? Okay. Right? Oh, yeah. The surrealness for sure with Elden Ring. And also, it feels like they've loosened up a lot of, they've just loosened up a lot. And, like, instead of it basically being, like, different variations of man with stick, they've really committed to the idea of allowing someone to create something that represents themselves in an interesting way, or something that comes out like that. They see that the avatar that you are in the game is, in a very serious way, a creative expression of the self, right? Like in the Dark Souls series, I always felt like your avatar was basically just trying to survive, and you would make decisions based on like just what's reasonable for your survival. Whereas in Elden Ring, it very much feels like your character is an expression of the self. So it creates you're not only are you going through this world and exploring the world around you and trying to find its mysteries and unpacking things and discovering stuff, but while you're doing that, you're also building a little creative character that is an expression of yourself. And when you find something that actually improves it, which is fairly rare in this game, it shifts things, and there's a change, and there's a perception shift that occurs, and Elden Ring is like the new Skyrim. Like when Skyrim came out, that was like a pillar in the gaming community where everybody was just like, there you go. New standard has landed. Skyrim. Elden Ring's the next one. It's the new standard, right? And it's coming out of like the Dark Souls creative vibe. But they've definitely taken a lot of the concepts and ideas that existed in Dark Souls and then like loosened them up in a way. Like in Dark Souls, every creature you fight is a gigantic pain in the ass. Right? Like and that's just straight up. Like every creature you fight is an enormous pain in the ass. And everything can kill you 100% of the time. But in Elden Ring, that's not so much the case, right? Like there is fodder. There's shit that you just kill, and you're just like, get out of the way. Get out of the fucking way. Witcher 3, a lot of people say that about Witcher 3. I never really viewed Witcher 3 as that important, honestly. Like, it didn't seem that... Like, I think the Assassin's Creed series was probably more important than Witcher 3, honestly. Like, I think that people who liked Witcher 3 just really liked it, you know? But I played it and I was just like, it's not really doing anything different. It's not really... Like, how is Witcher 3 really different from any other kind of open world exploration storytelling game? I just never really got into it, honestly. Like, I think the thing that really held Witcher 3 back for me personally was the character himself. That, like in Elden Ring, you are that avatar, right? That avatar is an expression of yourself. And it's the classic, like, silent protagonist, right? And if you want to go into that game and you want to be like a stealthy, stabby kind of guy, that's what you're going to do. And if you want to be a wizard, that's what you're going to do. And if you want to be a big dude wearing huge armor with shields and stuff, that's what you're going to do, right? But in Witcher 3, and Skyrim also had that kind of element where it was an expression of yourself, that the avatar was something that you were creating and pouring yourself and your own creativity into while you reacted. Whereas Witcher 3, you were always that guy, right? What was his name? I can't remember his name. And that to me was the limiting factor of Witcher 3. That if you weren't really in for that guy's story, and if you didn't think that guy really mattered, or if you found him to be kind of, I don't know, dude. Like, I find like the brooding, like, anti-hero archetype to be kind of boring, honestly. I'm like, get over yourself. Like, it would be way cooler. I'd love to play a game like Witcher 3 where, like, the protagonist was actually just kind of, like, whistling around being nuts, right? That'd be way more interesting. I'd be way more like, oh, wow, this guy's kind of off his rocker a little bit, right? But this idea that's like, oh, I'm going to go kill another monster, and life is hard, and I'm just going to sit here and drink and brood, and I'm a tough Witcher guy. I'm like Batman, but I'm medieval, I guess. I'm just going to go around and be like this. I'm like, do I really want to hang out with that guy for 40, 50 hours? Not really, honestly. Like, if this guy was, like, walking around being like, oh, wow, we get to go kill a monster. Let's go have some fun. I'd be like, okay, here we go. This guy's fucking off his rocker. I'm currently aggravating myself with EVE Online. Yeah, dude. Anytime I try to plunge into EVE Online, I'm just like, it's big and it's daunting. It's too much. Where's Daniel at, man? Is he even going to pop in? He said next Tuesday should work. Where's the man? We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, this has been a major I got to tell you guys, this is exactly what I need right now. This is exactly what I need right now. The world is too fucking ridiculous. The world is too fucking ridiculous. I haven't been sleeping. Everything is exhausting. Oh, have you played Fable? Fable's great, honestly. Like, it's a fundamentally flawed game. It doesn't really deliver on the big promises that it made. But I think that Fable is one of these games that's like a stepping stone game. You know, like that it reached for big things, and while I think it does come up short, in the reaching, it showed a lot of other people, oh, if you just keep reaching a little bit farther, right? If you just keep going a little bit more, right? It really laid the foundation for a lot of stuff and showed a lot of people that, like, oh, you can make something that's like an action RPG where there's magic but also, like, you could be a warrior or this kind of stuff, and it works out, and it had like a sort of open worldiness, but not as open as today for obvious reasons, right? Like, just the limitations, and like, Fable in my perception was very much like a game that was pushing against the barriers. And while I never thought that Fable broke through and really exploded the barrier open, I think that if you don't have Fable pushing against that barrier, then you don't get the games that actually manage to do it. And Skyrim was the game that actually did it. Like, in Fable, you are, like, still fairly linear, right? There isn't that many places to go. The world isn't that open, right? Whereas Skyrim, like, they really understood that the world is open, right? You can go wherever. If you can see it, you can go there. And then Dark Souls, that's, in my view, the big success about Dark Souls. That, like, their level design is so brilliant because you're, like, standing on a cliffside looking at a castle, and that castle's not a picture. It's not a set piece. That's the castle that you're going to go to, and you can see where you're going to go. That's the brilliance of Dark Souls level design, and I think they, like, intrinsically build within the player this sense of anticipation, this sense of wonder and journey, because you're constantly seeing. And I see this in Elden Ring all the time. Like, I'm literally, like, I'm standing on the world map and I just look over and there's a tower, and I'm just like, off to check out the tower. And then you go towards the tower, and before you know it, there's, like, crevices and, like, gorges, and there's, like, a dragon in the way. Like, you can't just go to the tower. Like, there's obstacles, right? And what's so brilliant, I think, about Elden Ring is that they've clearly done this on purpose. Like, they've clearly been like, yeah, there's a big old tower. Aren't you curious about what's in the big old tower? And because there's so many of these things all over the map, you essentially end up setting your own goals, right? Because there isn't really, like, a goal. Like, nobody, like, at the beginning of the game, people are like, you should head to that castle, I suppose. And that's, like, the only real direction you get. But the map is so big, and there's so many things to do and to see and to explore, that you're constantly just stumbling into shit. And sometimes you stumble into shit on your way to other shit, right? And you're like, yeah, sure, why don't I spend my, like, 2 nights ago, I literally spent my whole night fighting one boss, and I didn't know why I was fighting the boss. Like, I literally was just like, oh, if I go down here, there's this boss. Why am I fighting this boss? Because I want to. And if I didn't want to, I would stop. If I just was like, this is annoying and I don't like it, I would just go do something else. And just, and so because you're like setting your own goal, it gives a real sense of ownership in the game. And because the progression isn't linear, if you're finding something to be difficult or you're not able to progress in this area, just leave. Go somewhere else. Do something else. Level up somewhere else. And then loop back around. And then really revel in the fact that you've gotten more powerful. And this dynamic creates a really interesting thing where sometimes you're fighting something and you're fighting a boss and you know that you're a little too weak. You just can tell. You don't really have all the resources you need, and you can tell, right? But you believe you can do it, right? And that kind of, and then overcoming that obstacle is fundamentally overcoming an obstacle that you set for yourself. And that if you say, you know what, I can't actually do this, I'm going to back off and get more resources and come back later, then that's still success. But if you overcome the obstacle that you set for yourself, that is also success. And so there's many different ways to approach the game, but everything is being set by the player themselves. And that's the real brilliance of Elden Ring, if you ask me. That the pace and the forward movement of the game it's all in your hands. It's all in your control from the outset. And if you just want to walk away from something, you do, right? Whereas a game like Fable, right, there's only really one place to go. And so the whole structure of the game and the whole structure of the piece is built around the idea that you do this and you do that and you do this and you do that and you do this. And by this point, you should be this level. And so that makes you strong enough to be able to overcome this. So as a very like this, that you never really hit an obstacle that you can't overcome by design. You know, that they've got it built out in such a way so that every obstacle should be overcomable because you, by necessity, have completed all the stuff that's behind you, right? So if you're not making it through, it really is just a matter of grinding on that thing. And because the game is designed to say to you, no, you're strong enough. We've ensured that you're strong enough to do this. Whereas Elden Ring is literally like, yeah, that's a dragon, dude. Get fucked. You know? It's literally like, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, it's a dragon. I wonder if I can take on the dragon. And you like shoot magic at her, you stab with your sword, and immediately you realize, nope. And the dragon just fucking eats you. And you're just like, all right. I'll see you later. I just don't know how people have the $300 to get a video card. I just bought a mid-size SUV for $1,400. $300 is too much for games. I mean, I use my system for dual reasons, of course, right? I do a lot of video editing. I do a lot of recording. I use this system for a lot of stuff. I also got this on a pretty good sale, so I got really lucky with this. So I shouldn't. This thing will carry me on until we get into the quantum computing, and then it'll be a whole other level. Right? One thing that's happening in computing that's really satisfying is that we're hitting the limit for standard computing. Like, they can't really grow too much, right? And like, I remember in the early days, you would buy a computer and then it would already be obsolete, right? Computing was like doubling in speed, like really fast, like boom, 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 boom. But over the last 5 years, it's really slowed down. They can't really get any bigger than they've gotten already. And the you know, you could just say that in the chat. Somebody's actually sending me texts. Having trouble sleeping? Try melatonin. You can get it at a drugstore in the vitamin section. Well, that's very sweet of you. That's very sweet of you. I'm looking at my phone because I'm worried that Daniel is actually trying to get a hold of me. He's late. Well, he's not late. He's got 1 minute. But maybe he's... This is exactly what I need right now, guys. Let's talk about bullshit. Let's talk about bullshit for the rest of the night. If Daniel doesn't show up, I'm just going to talk about total bullshit because I need it so badly. My brain is like a bowl of pasta. It's just like I want open world games where the protagonist isn't the center of the universe. A lot of massively multiplayer games are like that. I think that like there are some games. I remember back in the day there was a game called. I wonder if that game still is running. I'd be surprised if it was. Tale of Egypt. Massive multiplayer game. No. It's a Tale in the Desert. That's what it is. Yeah, Tale in the Desert. This game is set in Egypt. Yeah, Tale in the Desert. That's I played a little bit of this. It's a crafting game though in the desert where you are collectively as a community building a society, and so everything you see is actually crafted by everybody. But the hitch of it is that you can't craft everything, right? You have to specialize. So there's only a small group of people in the game world who are capable of creating pinwheels, right? But pinwheels are necessary to create a different kind of a thing. And so you need people who have specialized over here creating this and are trading to these people and these people, right? And then these people, of course, are trading with them. And so it creates an internal economy. And there will be situations where there will be shortages because not enough people are actually doing this. And so it creates like an incentivization structure. It creates a market system within this game where people, like as you can see, it's just like an open world desert sort of a thing. And it legitimately creates like its own community with an endpoint, right? There's unlike massive multiplayer games that always are just open forever. This game actually has an endpoint. So if you as a community actually build the monument or erect a certain political dynasty, that's the end of the tale, and you've done it as a people, all together, collectively. And so you're not the protagonist of the center of the universe. You're one member of a community working towards a collective goal, which I thought I always thought was very, very fascinating. Very, very fascinating idea that I wish more games would explore, right? That instead of you being exactly as you say, the protagonist of the center of this universe, right? That you're actually just one of many working towards a collective goal. And it's something that you don't see in massive multiplayer games. And I think the reason you don't see it is because of the hyper focus of individualization of our society. That people don't actually believe you can create a game where people are collectively working towards a goal. That everything's got to be a struggle against one another, right? That's how our ethos works. And you can see how this is actually sharply different from the way Chinese games work, right? The Chinese market, like I remember, I used to play World of Warcraft, right? I know, I did my time, just like everybody else. And World of Warcraft introduced 40-man raids, which I thought ruined the game, right? That up until then, they were all 5-man raids, which was perfect because I had a group of friends. We were 5 of us, and we would go do these raids, right? It was super good. And then they introduced 40-man raids, and I was of the opinion that it completely ruined the game because it ruined my game experience for sure. But what I didn't understand at the time, and I came to understand, is that they did it because of the Chinese market, because the Chinese market is huge, right? And you sort of think to yourself, well, they still could have done 5-man raids. Why did they need to do these 40-man raids? Well, at the time, the number one massive multiplayer game in China, the raids that they would do would have 1,600 people. The highest level raids would be 1,600 people all at once, focusing on a single objective, right? Fighting a single thing together, 1,600 people. And so when World of Warcraft tried to get into the Chinese market and they only had 5-man raids, the Chinese basically said, that's not serious. Like that, we don't take that seriously. It's not really a game. That's not really fun for us. And so they were like, okay, well, what about 40? And the Chinese were like, okay, 40, that's reasonable. 40, okay, right? And so it was like a negotiation between the North American market and the Chinese market. And it really was the first time, because I was very young when this was all happening, but it was the very first time that I really was like, oh, China's a different place. They've got a different way of looking at the world. What's up with China? Video games, bringing us all together, living in the world community. How far am I into One Piece now? They just, the reindeer just joined the party. Yeah, that's the best way to say it without, I think, blowing up the whole thing. I'm blown away at how much time they're taking with this reindeer, dude. Like, they're taking a lot of time with that character, man. Like, I think he's got more time than Nami's arc, right? Like, Nami's arc was my favorite arc so far, for sure. Nami's arc was so, like, I was really invested in Nami's arc because she was fighting, like, enslavement. Like, that, her arc was really, really harrowing in that kind of way where, like, there's this, like, overpowering demon who has taken over her village and her town, responsible for killing her mother, right, or her motherly figure, right, in enslaving her to this idea and then undercutting her constantly, and then of course it all boils up, and you see it's boiling up with Rufy coming along and trundling along, and he refuses. What was so beautiful about that arc is that he refused to act until she asked for his help, because he refused. He refuses to undercut her own consent. Like that's what made that moment really beautiful, and really made me kind of fall in love with Luffy as a character even more. That he always could have come in and torn the place up, which is what he ultimately does. But he refused to do so until he was given permission by the person who was most embroiled in it. Because he doesn't see himself as a white knight, right? He sees himself as an equal and a peer to her, which and that whole arc was so wonderful. And then since then, it's been a little bit faffy, and now they're spending just this enormous amount of time on this reindeer character, and I'm just like, I don't know if I care that much about this guy. Like, he's cute, but we're right near the end of it, so I'm just gonna push through it, and super enjoyable, dude. If you guys want to see something that is lighthearted, that is absolutely fun and delightful, while simultaneously having like very strong character moments and strong arcs, strong storytelling. It's a good story, well told, without a doubt. One Piece is the way to go. It's the fundamental backbone of the piece. It is about a young man named Luffy who has managed to get superpowers. His body is rubber, because there are magical fruits that grant you superpowers, and so everybody has like various and odd superpowers. And because of the way they've done it, literally, they can introduce literally anything, right? It's quite fun. But the backbone of the story is that this boy, Luffy, wants to become king of the pirates. That's his whole thing. And he says it over and over and over and over and over again. It just keeps coming up. He's going to be the king of the pirates. And, like, you're looking at him and you're like, yeah, probably. And it just keeps getting, like, and it starts from a very lovable and sort of childish sort of place, and not childish like dumb, but very adventurous and wondrous in that kind of way. But then it grows up. It does. It grows up. It becomes more serious as the show as it progresses. And from what I've seen and gleaned from other sources, it looks like that trend just continues. That it just continues becoming more and more grown up as it goes along. And so one of the major themes does seem to be growing up and learning how to be a grown up, and like Luffy constantly being confronted with his kind of childish behavior, because he is a child, like literally in many ways, and it's so rare to see a piece of media that actually does confront growing up. Like we have these like coming of age stories, and something like Harry Potter. One of the reasons we all fell in love with Harry Potter was because we grew up with it. That as we were growing up, so too was Harry Potter, and the content of the art itself was growing up. And when you go back and you actually read through the Harry Potter story again, you see that that's like literally the case. Book 1 is this big, book 2 is this big, book 3 is this big, book 5 is like this big, right? And like it's really fleshing out, and Harry Potter begins to understand more and more. Like someone like Dumbledore begins to he's less a cartoon and less of a character and more of like a real person who exists in the world, and that really speaks to how humans perceive the world. That when you're young, everyone is kind of like an icon or a god of sorts, right? Like your own parents, right? Everybody goes through the realization that your parents are completely fallible, and everybody believes initially that their parents are incapable of doing any wrong, that they are like a god type figure, right? Everybody thinks this at first, right? It's where the whole like my dad could beat up your dad stupid shit comes from, right? When you're a kid. And part of growing up is recognizing that your parents are just people, that they're trying their best. And this is why you have like that teenage rebellion moment, and like in the I feel like everybody in their like late teens and early 20s has this kind of like blowing off of their parents, because they think their parents should have done better, or they think that you're just this, that, or the other thing. But like the steady realization and the forgiveness that comes with looking at your own parents and realizing like, oh, they're just like me. Like I feel uncertain and lost, and I don't really know what's going on, and I feel scared, and everything is shifting under my feet all the time. Well, that's their story too. And I think once you realize that, and you come to that understanding of your own parents, and you come to them with that kind of forgiveness, and understanding their narrative as well, and their life as well, it helps enrich your own life in a very serious way. And that's the process of growing up. That you can see people who are immature because they think their parents should have done X, Y, or Z. And it's like, yeah, but they probably couldn't have, right? Like life is a much larger force than they are, right? And so to accept that, and to forgive your parents for their failings, and to accept that they were trying their best and doing their best with the circumstances that they had around them, I think is a huge part of what it is to be considered grown up. And you can see that in a lot of the most popular media, right? Like there are characters like, and Harry Potter is a perfect example of this. Just like he starts by perceiving the world one way, and then as he ages and grows and matures, that perception shifts, and he begins to see and accept that these figures who he thought were infallible are in fact quite fallible, and that fallibility is not is not something to be despised, but something to simply be accepted. And that's what it is to be a fucking grown-up in the world. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent right there, coming out of One Piece, right? This is why you gotta pay. You gotta watch this shit, right? Art, right? Art. It gets into your brain and it worms you around. I just turned on CBC, CTV, and Fox, and they were talking about Ukraine, and all used the same video while talking about. They cited the source Azov Battalion outlet. I know, right? Like, and they're doing everything they can to completely whitewash Azov, right? To completely get Azov into a place where it's like, oh yeah, these aren't. Hey, thanks, Rob. I appreciate that, bud. World of Warcraft had bigger economy than half of Africa? Jesus Christ. That's fucked up. Conan Exiles. I didn't play Conan Exiles, but I knew somebody who did, and he loved it. He was all about it. Like, to openly cite it as a source, knowing who they are, then again, they don't come out in public. I'm too dumb and uninformed to make actual opinion on what's going on. Yeah, I mean, like, if you don't know who the Azov Battalion is, right? And they're doing everything they can to try to control that, to try to make sure that people don't understand what the Azov Battalion actually is, right? I'm old enough to have played Elder Scrolls Arena in Bible College. That game was huge, open, and randomly generated. Yeah, dude. Like, well, the Elder Scrolls series is always kind of was like that, right? That was like top-down, though, right? Was that like Baldur's Gate? Completely off topic. White Sox beat Milwaukee. Awesome. Go White Sox. Das Kapital MMO. Perfect. Got Assassin's Creed 3 for my Wii for like $5. Super fun. Gadsden flags and genocide of indigenous people. Ugh. Now, I got into AC when they gave me Unity for free after Notre Dame burned, and I loved the French Revolution history. Oh yeah, man. I love. I'm a big fan of teaching history through video games. I actually am. Like, when I was young, I loved like Age of Empires. Civilization, the Civilization franchise. And in the early days, they were much better at actually teaching the history, right? Like, modern iterations of games like Civilization and Age of Empires have really backseated a lot of the historical storytelling in favor of just like pew-pew. Like, I feel like that's true of like the Battlefield games, that the very first Battlefield games were actually interested in trying to tell a story about World War II. Like, they had you actually storm the beaches of Normandy. And I remember I played that storming of the beaches of Normandy, and I really had a moment when I was like 15 where I was like, I cannot believe people did this. Like, that is staggering to me that people actually did this, right? Here I am, my video game self, trying to fucking storm the beach in Normandy, right? And what happened? You get fucking owned constantly, right? And it's like a hellscape, and it's ridiculous. And like, you can't help but have this moment of like, holy fuck, like, people did this shit. And but I remember as they began iterating on Battlefield, it ceased to be about teaching what war was and trying to successfully articulate the nature of war and warfare, and it just became about the glorification of war. And that's when I really was like, no, this is unacceptable. I actually find the Battlefield games to be quite insulting. Like, if I was a World War II veteran, and they interviewed World War II veterans when this phenomenon started happening, and to a man, they all said that this was fucking bullshit. Like, this idea that instead of using this as a way to kind of illustrate and show what happens in war and the consequences of war to the soldiers and to the people, but instead trying to treat it like they're superheroes, like going in to save the day and all this kind of shit. Like, I think that's actually quite gross. Like, and what they're doing with like the Call of Duty games, like all of this, like, it's one thing if you're like Doom, right? Like, literally like space guns going and killing demons in hell. You're like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's go, right? Like, that's great. But this glorification of war on like in like a literal, like, you are a soldier for the United States military going in and resolving a conflict, and you're always like the good guy, and you're always doing the right thing, and there's no real consequence, and there's no real sense of true danger. There's no real sense of morality or purpose, even outside of just like, you've got a gun and those guys are against you, shoot them. And I actually find that to be really abhorrent. I literally can't play those games. Like I sit down and I'm just like, it's taking someone's real experience, right? Our soldiers, who we're supposed to glorify and we're supposed to say are great warriors and they're fighting on behalf of our own culture and all this kind of stuff, and basically creating a parodied version of them to create this like glorification to sucker kids into signing up. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's just all being done to sucker kids to enlist because they think it's going to be like this, and then it fucking isn't. Like it really isn't. So it's a total grift from the start, and like I feel like any like you want to signal and a sign that our culture is in this like major state of decline. It's this idea that we're using our war heroes and using our veterans as set pieces to glorify these conflicts that they themselves found abhorrent and hellish, right? Like, they weren't fans of storming the beaches of Normandy. They weren't fans of doing any of this kind of stuff. But when you play these games, you're like, hoorah. That's basically the result. You're, hoorah! That's it. That's what you get. And it's you gotta make one a year and sell a shit ton of copies. Albion Online is like that kind of. I've only seen Albion Online through the ads, right? But it looks interestingly enough. Sword Art Online, yeah. RuneScape. The people who are into RuneScape love RuneScape. I every time I get into it, I'm a bit like, Wait until the Pirate Odyssey had an update. We could keep the AI. Love 40-man raids. Took massive. The 40-man raids, my sister was huge into the coordination and the planning. And I just was a tag-along mainly. And I found it just got too cumbersome. Like, the organization became the game. That you spent less time actually playing and more time organizing yourself. And I just like, I'm just going to go do something else, you know? AC way too stupid when you have to hit a dude 200 times to take half his health. Yeah. One Piece drives me crazy. After the origin stories, the battles just stretch over like 10 episodes. That's anime, baby. That's anime. That's how it goes. It's like a soap opera where one move happens each episode. The chef's backstory was awesome. Yes, the chef's backstory was actually good. No, the backstories are all good and the storytelling is all good. You just got to be in for that. You got to be in for the slower pace of storytelling because it gives everything a much more, like, every action is epic. And when anybody does anything, it isn't just that they do it, it's that you have to see how every single character is reacting to it, right? Like, the classic is Dragon Ball, right? Like, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, where, like, Goku starts Super Saiyaning, and it's not enough that he's, like, standing there going, like, ah! Like, becoming a Super Saiyan. You need to see what Vegeta thinks, and you need to see what, like, the rest of them, like Bulma and, like, all the rest of them. Like, everybody needs to react to it. You need to see how they're reacting, because that moment is part of building them as a character, right? That you can't exclude them from this excessively amazing moment. And then it breaks into several different parts, right? Like everyone's disbelief that he's doing it in the first place. You need to see all of that. And then he starts doing it, and everyone's reaction to that. And then he hits another level of it, and then everyone needs to react to that. And then finally he finishes it, and then everybody needs to react to that, right? And that takes a whole fucking episode to see that transition. Because there's so many characters, and you care about all of them, and so like and you've been following their backstories, and you know, and good anime, like One Piece is good anime because it doesn't just introduce a character and just let them be there. Everybody needs to have this like foundation of backstory that you invest in an individual sense, so that when the larger moments happen and they're reacting to it, it's tied and tethered to this enormous storytelling structure that's already been well established. And it's like, that's what I like. Anime really gives itself permission to be like this, and you're in or you're out. I think that's really what it comes down to. You know, you're either in for that or you're not, and sometimes it's just nice to be in for it. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I put like One Piece on and then like play a game of chess or something, right? I'm not always like 100% like pushing my chips in, being like, what's gonna happen in One Piece every single time, because sometimes it really is like nothing really happens. but in anime, nothing really happens as dramatically as possible. Like when nothing happens in anime, it's because they meant it. They really meant for nothing to happen. And you can see how anime, like I've actually studied not crazy in depth, but I studied a little bit of Japanese theater, right? My background is theater. I have a degree in theater, right? And I've taken a couple of courses and spent a little bit of time studying Japanese theater. And once you understand how Japanese theater worked, it makes anime make a lot more sense, I think. Because Japanese theater... like the Japanese theatrical tradition used to be, there was one theater family, right? There was literally a family that was responsible for telling the story, right? And what was fascinating about the way it worked is that the story itself was kind of set in stone, and they'd been the same story that they'd been telling for like several hundred years, right? And it's like this well-established familial kind of thing. And the story structure follows what they call the way of the flower, which is that a flower grows, right? So it's young. It reaches like it's full grown, so it's like an adult. Then it blooms, so it's like an actual adult. So it's not a young adult, it's an adult. And then it dies, right? So old age and elderly, right? And through this process, the way of the flower, each of these 4 steps, which of course align with the 4 seasons, is considered beautiful and full of dignity in its own right. Right? Unlike our society, which it renders the elderly invisible, the way of the flower insists that the moment of decay, as the flower decays, is itself beautiful and is itself part of the structure of life and should be honored in such a way. And so what's fascinating about this is, so the story begins, they cart in all of the kids, right? So you're looking at 2-year-olds basically walking on stage wearing like whatever ritual gear they give them, right? And the kids go on stage and they just recite their lines, and they're terrible because they're 2, right? And they're just like, Chida Buddha, and they sing a song or whatever, and the audience like, yeah, here we go, because that's the next generation. Like, this is the next generation of your storytellers right here you're looking at, right? And you see this every year. They put this on every year, and so you are going to watch it every single year. And then the next group comes on, and they're slightly older, and the next group comes on, and they're slightly older, and the next group comes on, and it's taking you through this way of the flower until finally you get to like the old man, and there's this set piece that's built into the theatrical storytelling where there's a cliffside and there's a samurai suit built into the cliffside that they've put this elderly man in, and it's fairly well understood that the person who is giving the speech at the top of this cliffside in this samurai suit, this is his final performance. He's probably going to die soon, right? And this is the last time that you're going to see this guy perform. And the speech that he gives is all about facing death with dignity and honor and living a full life, and that this is part of life. And there's lightning and all this kind of stuff. And what's so beautiful about the whole process of it is that that man who's giving that speech at that time, if you are a middle-aged man, like if you're my age, you've seen this performance 30 times, 30 plus times. And so you've seen that man get old, right? You've seen him, like maybe he was 20 when you first started watching these, right? Or maybe he was 40 when you first started watching these, and you've watched him progress along the story as you yourself have aged and begun to recognize yourself in the story. And this type of theatrical storytelling is so unique to Japanese theater because they really tried to embed the story in such a way so that you as the viewer become part of the theater and you become part of the story, that the story isn't just something you're passively watching, but it's something that you are actively living and engaging with year by year, that the story remains the same. You're the thing that changes. And as you grow and as your perception shifts, so too does your understanding of the fullness of the story and the fullness of the way of the flower. And so this extends, I think, into anime, which is, I think, anime really. There's a theatrical tradition in Japan. Like, we're so used to things being so rapid fire and things are got to be like boom, 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 boom. Whereas in Japanese theater, there's an explicit style of theater, and I forget the name of it offhand, which is annoying, but where they literally do exactly the opposite, where all of the characters move so, like, the only way to describe it is aggressively slowly, that they are obviously choosing to, like, and I'm no lie, like, they are moving at this pace. And the purpose of doing it is to give the viewer and the participants a sense of time actually passing, to create a space where the viewer and the participant becomes aware of the passage of time. That's the goal, to create that awareness that, yes, this is slow, but all that's really shifted is your perception of it and your awareness of it, right? That life can actually be quite slow if we all decide to engage in it in that way. And this theatrical tradition, because their argument, of course, is that going through that kind of experience, and I've talked to people and they've experienced it and they've been like, it was quite tedious. But once you go through that kind of, it's like lifting weights. It's hard, but it's good for you, right? Because it's good for you because it's hard. Because if you go through that difficulty, right, then everything else is actually a lot easier and it lifts burdens in many ways. And I find that anime has attached itself to this idea in very serious ways. That yes, it's slow, and yes, it takes its time, and yes, it takes big moments and then really makes them very intricate and slows them down. But it's going through that process is enriching and creates an enrichment that cascades through the story, and then if it's any damn good, into your life. And so anime is always fascinating to me for that reason. And sometimes it can be frustrating, obviously. I feel like because of the structure of the way of this storytelling format, Japanese anime often lacks satisfying resolutions, because the Western style of storytelling, the resolution, like they lived happily ever after, right? Like the resolution is sort of the point. You want to have a nice landing, a nice resolution. Whereas the in the Japanese theatrical tradition, and thereby in anime and in Japanese storytelling, the ending is often not a resolution, right? It's just when you stop watching. That's the show ends because, you know, the character dies, or this is it. Like you're just moving on now, right? And you're oftentimes, I feel like I'm left with sort of an unsettled sense of unresolution when I finish an anime, which I think is part of it. I think that that's kind of what they're aiming at. They're saying to you, this character continues on. This story continues on. You're just no longer going to pay attention to it. And so then it continues living in your memory and in your life, even though you're no longer watching it, you're still imagining it, and you're still creating it, and you're still living it in a sense of wonder. I felt that way about Death Note. Like, I felt the ending of Death Note to be very unsatisfying, and the way that I'm not going to spoil it or anything, but just the way the the way the story resolved itself, I felt was very unsatisfied with that. But it's that dissatisfaction created a lot of why was I dissatisfied? I thought about it more, right? Whereas a lot of Western stories, I feel like you get to the ending and the story resolves itself, and then you're like, oh, that was wonderful, and then you move on and you forget about it. Whereas I think with Japanese stories, you get to the ending and there's that kind of sense of unsettledness, and so you end up dwelling on it, and so that means that you spend more time with it than you would have otherwise, unpacking that and searching yourself, which is a great achievement of Japanese storytelling, I find, which is they accept that you are part of the story, and that if they can reach out and continue the story inside of you, and to continue your unpacking of the story, then the story continues living through you. Yeah. I really do love anime. I love theater. I love storytelling. Can you tell? Can you tell I have a degree in theater, guys? Can you tell? My background is in this shit. I love it, man. I love it. Humans are storytellers. Like that is what really separates us from everything. We have the ability to articulate abstract thought and understand it, and to communicate in abstract spaces, and then manifest those abstract thoughts and spaces into the real world. And Western society has declared that we should not use it. Boo. Boo to that. Boo to that. And like, growing up my whole life, I studied storytelling, and I studied theater, and I studied this kind of stuff because I was fascinated by it, because it's the thing that separates us from everything else. And the whole time I was told to get a better job. Literally studying the very thing that separates us from the rest of creation. And I was told to just get a better job. Oh yeah, well, this is a failure. We have failed as a society. Conspiracy theory. Some online games information is collected to improve on real-world game theory. For sure, dude. No, for sure. I think that's absolutely the truth. And honestly, I think people would be dumb not to do that. I think video games can, like, we are going to see a video game, because I see them keep trying. They keep iterating, right? There is a video game that's going to come out that's finally going to actually nail what an economy actually is and how it actually works, right? Most of the time, the games that have economies are very rudimentary, right? Like, you imagine, like, oh, I put a citizen here and it produces gold, and then gold goes into a pile, and then I use that gold to buy a military unit or a building, right? Like that's a very rudimentary form of an economy that doesn't actually that isn't actually real. It's not actually how it functions or how it works, right? But it is just a way to create a kind of an engine or a kind of cycle that supports itself. And you do see games where economies do start to spring up, and people do start to build market economies and things like this. The major flaw I find with most games economies are that there's an infinite amount of resources and wealth to extract. So there's no limit to the amount that can be in the world. And I do think there is going to come a time where someone's going to make some kind of game and be like, there are a limited amount of resources. You only can get this amount, and you can create this amount of stuff with it. And in many ways, like games like StarCraft, like real-time strategy games like that, do understand this concept. There's limited resources, and the limited resources is part of the backbone of the game. You use those resources to build military units, and those military units fight against one another. And if your resource base is strong, then your military will be strong, and you'll blow into each other, and whoever. But it really can come down to who exploits resources the best. But we haven't quite gotten to a point where a game has come out that has actually been like, well, wait a minute. A nation is actually citizens, and citizens have requirements. And I shouldn't say this because there are games, like I think about the Anno series, right? Like if you don't know about the Anno series, this one's a very Anno 1800 I think was the most recent one, where you basically play as a colonial power, right, coming in and taking over an island, right? And you start as very like low-level town, basically. But then to upgrade this town, you need to provide resources to them, right? And those resources are limited in scope. The map only has a certain amount of them. And so it does end up creating something of an economy that is somewhat more true to how things actually would have worked in the real world. And so I do think that video games are capable of creating models and showing what's the theory of how things probably or possibly could be. And you see this even with games like SimCity, right? That SimCity is not exactly an accurate city building game, but it creates a foundation that city planners can come off of, or a way to communicate concepts into the general public that aren't necessarily well understood. And so I think video games are absolutely one of the most, like, it's still growing. It's still figuring itself out. Like, it's still articulating something, and those articulations are getting closer and closer and closer to something that's real. And I do think, especially when it comes to economics, that as the neoliberal period starts to fade away and we start to understand that, like, oh, this idea that, like, we put all the money in a pile and then that actually does fall out, like, it doesn't actually work that way, that there are going to be designers who start to make games based on what an economy actually looks like and what money actually is, right? I'm starting to see that already in Paradox games, Crusader Kings and all this, where you can literally print money. Like, they understand that money is not actually a tangible thing. You can just create it if you want, but it creates inflation, right? Which causes problems in your larger economy. And so as video games start to iterate on economics and on concepts of economics, and honestly, as a lot of Western designers start to understand Marxism a little bit more and start to understand that Marxism is actually closer to the bone, right? And start to implement those ideas into their game designs, video games are going to articulate some really cool economic ideas, I think, and some really interesting stuff is going to pop out of them. It's going to be nerdy as fuck. It's going to be the nerdiest shit in the world. It's going to like what we're talking about now is like the real true nerd shit. Like your Civilization games and your world building games and all of this, right? Like and lots of like the Civilization franchise, for example, has never really been able to articulate a declining empire very well. Everything is always a linear path upwards. That maybe you have a moment where you plateau because you don't necessarily have the growth to be able to propel yourself upwards, but everything is always up. It doesn't actually understand or have a system in place to articulate the idea of why empires decline and why societies fall into decay and decline. And that's of course in this era where we are going into a decline, that is something that is starting to get explored now. Why is it that civilizations go into decline? Why is it that societies go into decline? What causes it? What's the impetus for it? Why do we find ourselves going into this decline at this moment during this period of time? And one of the things that game designers don't necessarily understand is that there is such a thing as hubris and human arrogance. That's how do you put that into a game design, right? The idea that the reason why a society is going into the decline that it's experiencing is because of its short-sightedness and its inability to really understand that it's alienating itself from the rest of the world. Like that's exactly what America has done, right? Like America has alienated itself from the rest of the world. And all for like this short-term gain. This idea that we'll use our military might and our financial institutions in order to inflict ourselves onto other countries in order to quote-unquote spread democracy, right? Create liberal democracies wherever we go and pretend like the people of the places that we blow up are fine with that. And if the countries that we attempt to destroy and exploit actually want to erect their own systems, then we'll sanction them. Well, the reality of that is if that's your strategy, eventually you're going to sanction everyone. And if you sanction everyone, then you're the isolated one. And then your empire falls into decline, which is exactly what's happening. And we don't know how to articulate that in larger models quite yet. Because it's not easy to create a model for a human being, because human beings are very difficult to model. Where part of the failing of neoliberal economics, if you ask me, is pretending as though human beings are rational actors. That assumption is one of the deadliest assumptions I think I've ever seen in any field of study, and tells you that these guys are out to lunch from the outset, right? Humans are not rational actors. They and you can tell that that's the case because humans are capable of holding contradictory worldviews in their brain at the same time. That humans are a ball of paradoxes, and they contradict themselves constantly, and they're constantly at odds. And something that is acceptable under one circumstance is completely unacceptable under a different circumstance, and the differences between those circumstances can be basically nothing, right? And we act one way towards one situation, and we act a completely different way towards a very similar situation that has very small gradient differences. We are a walking set of contradictions as humans. That's who we are. That's what we do. And part of the arts and part of video game design and part of all this kind of stuff is to try to understand that and understand these odd contradictions and these paradoxes. And the goal, I think, of any stable society or any society that wants to be stable is to attempt to create a system that can withstand that the true difficulty for any society is to be able to withstand the multiplicity of contradictions that humans bring to the conversation by a default. And our systems are not capable of that. Like, for God's sakes, we elect our leadership in a popularity contest. Like, for real, it really does come down to who has the floofiest haircut and a name we recognize. Like, we that is not a system that can withstand the absurd contradictions and paradoxes that humans bring to the table. It just can't. And we pretend like it can. And that's not going to work out for us. Tale of the Desert still active, interesting. I haven't heard of Dragon's Nest. Maple Story I've heard of. Maple Story was pretty unique because it was like a 2D platformer kind of a thing, right? Isn't this true? Wasn't there some WoW virus or something? There was. Yeah, that there was an event that they had put. I had quit the game by now, but this became notorious. That they had introduced like a plague into a specific zone. So there was like a boss that gave you a plague, and then you could infect someone else, right? And that was supposed to be in a limited space. So it was just like a boss event. But for some reason, and I don't exactly understand how, but for some reason, this plague, this virus, was able to get outside of that space and get into the wider world. And so it started to spread throughout the game world. And it actually became something of like a model for how societies react, or how they could react to a virus outbreak. Because what was really fascinating about the virus outbreak that happened is that it could be cured. That there was a specific class that had a spell that could actually cure this. And so people actually took it upon themselves to try to cleanse cities of this and try to clear this out. But of course, video games being video games and trolls being trolls, there were people who were like, I'm going to spread this thing. I'm going to fucking spread this thing for fun, just to say fuck you to this. And ultimately, this got so out of hand, and it became so infectious, it became so widespread that they had to shut the server down and reset it to an earlier date before this occurred. And so people lost progression, like all kinds of stuff happened because of this. And it was all just because of an oversight where this virus got out into the larger game world from a space it wasn't supposed to be able to get out of. But it was a fascinating moment. It was a fascinating moment of to see how humans actually act during these periods of time. And we like to believe that the trolls were only trolling because the consequences really are limited to the game world, right? Like, it's not really impactful. It doesn't really matter, right? But I think that that's probably a pretty accurate representation of how humans act amidst crisis, right? We see during the COVID-19 period of time, right, the anti-mask types, the people who didn't really care and put up a fuss about needing to be part of this. And I genuinely think there are trolls in the conversation for sure, right? Absolutely. I will recommend anime 2019 Dororo. I'm still deep with One Piece. I don't think I can move on from that. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is also good. Yeah, someone recommended Full Metal Alchemist. I was not very satisfied with, but somebody recommended watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That's actually a lot stronger. Age of Empires 2, you bet, bud. We've been building the biggest campaign the Ontario NDP has ever run. It's time to vote Doug Ford out. We're going to make it happen. Yeah, okay. Do the ONDP think they have a chance to win after what Jugmeat's saying did? Andrew openly sports it. Like, the NDP is weak. That's all. They're just weak. Right? And part of the reason why they're weak is because the populace is weak. Like, we're not out in the streets protesting. Like, we're not like really fighting back, right? Like, would these NDP be bolder if we were taking to the streets more, right? I think so. but you know, they're essentially trying to woo Doug Ford voters, right? Because there's this ethos that exists in the political base that says we're not going to bother trying to activate non-voters, right? That the people who are voting are the people that we're talking to. And I think that's a failed strategy from the outset. And I think that the Bernie Sanders campaign showed that you can activate non-voters. But you got to start talking a bigger game. You got to grow a pair, right? But the reality is people like Horvath and people like Jagmeet Singh, they're just as in thrall to the capitalist death cult. They still believe in the capitalist system. They still think that the rich are capable of being reasonable when they're not, right? And so they're not really fighting a fight, right? And they can't really offer anything because ultimately they agree that the system is fine as it is, right? So it's all just small-scale piecemeal reformism, which is unacceptable at this period of time, right? Like, maybe 20 years ago people would buy into that. But, like, there are major crises in front of us, and the ONDP is just not rising to the occasion. They're simply not. Like, not even in their rhetoric, right? Like, it's one thing to expect action, but, like, you do expect a certain understanding of rhetoric, right? A certain understanding of what needs to be said and what needs to be done in terms of just speech making and rhetoric and propaganda. And they're just not doing it. Like, straight up, they're just not rising to the occasion. It's as you say, like, they're not really reading the room. Like, we're in the middle of a climate catastrophe. Homelessness is spiking. Inflation is going through the roof. People are scared about the future. And what's the NDP really offering? What, 2 sick days? Get fucked. There were 5 MG-42s on Omaha Beach. MG-42s fired at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, or 20 a second. This means that every single second, they could have been firing 100 rounds at you. Rommel flooded many of the forests, and because of the way that American paratroop buckles worked, it took 15 seconds to actually take off the buckle, let alone the radio, parachute, field jacket, etc. So most American paratroopers in D-Day ended up drowning. Within 2 minutes of the invasion at Omaha, at 6:38, 2/3 of the first wave was already dead. Yeah, that's sobering, right? Like, that's sobering. And it's not something that I think should be celebrated. Like, I was fine when they showed it. I was fine when they said go through it, experience it. But it shifted over into being like a veneration of it, like a glorification of it. I think I was 15 when it was Street Fighter 2, GoldenEye. GoldenEye is one of the fucking classics, man. GoldenEye is like truly... The multiplayer on GoldenEye, they weren't going to put it in the game initially. Look up ant-walking alligators of Hiroshima if you want to ruin your day. No, thank you. This is why I love listening to people talk about One Piece, because everyone gets something different from it. Of course, there's so much going on. For me, One Piece is about freedom. I can't say too much more of why that's the case until you finish the Alabasta arc. I mean, it's clearly about freedom. Like, everybody's like, they're going to the, like, it's about exploration. It's about they're going to the Grand Line, right? And they're pursuing their own objectives, and everybody has their own true reason for wanting to be there. Everyone has their own motivation, and all of their motivations align so that they can all be on the ship together. I remember that you said the reindeer is the annoying Joker type of character. Do you still believe this? No, he's not the annoying Joker type of character, for sure. He's actually... The reindeer character actually ends up being very interesting because he's so unique. He's so unique, and his perception is very... Like, he's thrust into the situations. And his loss and his sacrifices are very deep. Are very deep and can't be simply... Like, they spend so much time getting you to sympathize with this character that you can't really just dismiss him. Like, he's a weird character, for sure. An odd character, for sure. But You really do come online with him. Oh yeah, Spirited Away. Brilliant. Monster by Naoki Urasawa, solid 10 out of 10. It's intense drama. Oh, you know what? If you're looking for just a great movie that is a amazing good time, that is an anime type, Redline. I loved Redline, dude. Redline was like the entire plot of Redline is people racing cars in an intergalactic underground race set on a planet called Robo World that doesn't want the race to take place there. That's the whole plot. And what's amazing about Redline is that it's very clear that they like made the decision that every shot needs to be the action that's occurring, but as far as it can. Just everything is pumped with as much adrenaline as possible. So it's not enough that like it isn't enough to show like a finish line, right? You got to show the finish line and see like the dust billowing over it. It's not enough to have a close-up of somebody's eye. You've got to see every line that is in there, and like the reds of the veins and all of that. It's not enough to see someone like pull back on the throttle. They gotta like rip back on it and then like experience the like fullness of the like every scene is just as amped up as it can possibly be. Even when it's soft. When it's soft, it's like it's as fluffy and as light as it could possibly be. And even though the plot is as straightforward as a plot can get, it's still a good story, well told. But each shot, it's just a beautifully shot. I shouldn't say shot because it's not, but drawn. It's just a beautifully presented film that really like you finish it and you're just like fuck yeah. That's what I like about Redline, you know, and it doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is, which is fundamentally a movie about race car drivers racing cars in an intergalactic underground space race called Redline. I highly recommend this to everybody, dude. If you're gonna watch any anime, if you're interested in watching any anime movie next, here you go. And if your complaint about anime is that it takes too long or like it's too spread out, Redline. The Redline's the thing for you. Whoever nationalizes anime gets my vote. Amazing. Oh yeah, full metal. Death Note, I loved. Last two episodes, yeah, I agree with you, Vince. 4 out of 10, right? Rooted the entire show, went from a 9 out of 10 to a 4 because of the last two episodes. Yeah, I tended to agree with you, Vince, but I think I've finally come to peace with it. That I think I understand why they went the way they went, you know, because it really. Or why the author went the way he went with it. And I don't want to spoil it, but I think that it's ultimately about hubris. It's ultimately, that's what it's about, and how fragile everything was, right? That Light wasn't actually in control, right? That he just believed he was. And this, and that fundamentally, this story that is about, like, death gods and a human attempting to become a god in his own world really does become a story about a sad little boy, right? And I think that thwarting of that expectation, where we as the viewer kind of expected it to elevate into this godhood level, but instead it didn't. Instead it went right? And that really brought out the humanity of a piece that before that had been about gods. And that Light really comes down to earth at the end. because he's not a god. He's a boy. Oh, dude, Game of Thrones Season 8 is a whole different beast. I am more or less of the opinion that the showrunners of Game of Thrones were paid off by Disney. I'm actually of that opinion. That the showrunners go and work for Disney after Game of Thrones, right? And I genuinely do think that Disney was like, well, Game of Thrones, HBO, it's our number one competitor, right? And obviously Game of Thrones and HBO wanted to continue spin-offs and all this kind of stuff. So I think Disney straight up just paid those guys off. They were just like, yeah, fuck this up. Like, make it bad, right? Just like, right? And then come work for us. We'll give you Star Wars, right? I think that's exactly what happened. Because, like, the ending to Game of Thrones writes itself. I think that's a big reason why George R.R. Martin can't finish the thing. Because he loves twists. He loves big twists, and he loves big, like, thwarting expectations, and that's his whole thing, right? The execution of Eddard Stark is one of the greatest twists in storytelling history, in fantasy history, certainly. Like, and especially when it's entrenched within the history of fantasy itself. Characters don't die in fantasy. They just don't, right? And so the execution of Eddard Stark was one of these, like, enormous, impactful moments in fantasy where the protagonist of your story dies at the end of the story. Spoilers, but I mean, at this point, you have to know. It's like saying that, like, Frodo finds a ring. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I think that the thing that Martin is struggling with is that the end of Game of Thrones is not a twist. It really isn't. It can't be, right? The name of the fucking story is A Song of Ice and Fire, right? It's all of these converging forces. Your druids like Bran, right? Your wizards like Tyrion. Your dragon riders like Daenerys. Your fucking like night watchmen like Death Eater paladins, which is Jon, right? Literal rogues and shit like Arya, right? All of these figures converge at Winterfell while White Walkers are coming to destroy Winterfell, and Cersei is there, and while these zombies are trying to destroy them, and they're all fighting against this existential force with sweet, awesome magic that they didn't use. Like, how much sweet, awesome magic happened in Game of Thrones Season 8? Basically nothing, right? Like, total whiff, right? Imagine, like, the conflict happening with Cersei walking around killing people for political reasons. Like, everybody, like, all of the political drama and all of that happening all at once. Everything just cascading forward with huge forces. And the fact that they resolved the fucking White Walkers, which are an existential threat arc for since the beginning. Literally, the prologue of the first book is about the White Walkers. And they resolve it in episode 2 of the final season, basically turning them into kind of a bookmark instead of the culmination of the story, which is obviously what they were. Right? Like, the showrunners fucked it up on purpose. Like, structurally. They meant to fuck it up. There's no other way to explain it. They literally took the antagonist of the story, which is the White Walkers, and anticlimactically resolved them in a single episode. Get fucked. Get fucked. They ruined it on purpose. And Martin can't finish his story because the story is straightforward now. Right? From the point that he's at now to the point where it needs to go, there's no twist. Get these characters in this place and fight a fucking war. Let's go. Magic. And he doesn't want to do it. That's all. He doesn't want to do it. Because I think now it's no longer pleasurable for him. Now it's a chore. Right? because he knows the story. He just needs to actually sit down and go like this for probably about 6 months straight. And he just doesn't want to. Because he's old, and he's tired, and he's a millionaire, and he doesn't care. And he should take all his notes, and he should give it to someone like Brandon Sanderson, and Brandon Sanderson will crank it out, and it'll be great. It will be. Like, we'll all read it and be like, fuck yeah, druids and wizards and magicians and fucking dragons and White Walkers and Cersei Lannister being a psycho bitch and Jaime Lannister's redemption arc and fucking Tyrion Lannister and all of these things, and they're all just blowing up. And then Jon wears a crown and fucking marries Daenerys. But that, and maybe actually write in the idea that Daenerys goes mad. If you want her to go mad, just start writing that in now. Right? Don't fucking have it be like, oh, it just went crazy, hippity hop, as like fucking ruining your whole character arc, like basic storytelling shit. Like these guys are professional storytellers. They know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing and they know what they did. They fucked up that story on purpose, for sure. Like no one can convince me otherwise. I hate Death Note ending. The first half was amazing, but the second half doesn't feel right at all. Also, a side note, there was one shot of Death Note that focused what occurred after the main story. Well, I didn't know that. That'd be interesting. I highly recommend going at Death Note again, but accepting that Light's not a god. Like, I think if you actually remember who Light is, right? That Light is a kid. Like, he's a teenage boy. Right? And all of the scheming and the plotting and all of that kind of stuff isn't genius. Right? It's him digging his own fucking grave. Like, I think that it makes it more impactful. And it kind of illuminates it a lot more. And I also had this opinion about Death Note for a long time, but it was the fact that it kept coming back up and I couldn't get it out of my brain, right? That is already a success, right? That instead of it resolving in a way that like a Marvel movie would resolve, then I forget about it. It really hung with me, and why? Because I think the story that the author is telling is a human story. That it's not about gods, and it's not about the heights of human potential, or it's not about all of that. It's about a uncertain, arrogant, scared little boy named Light. It's a tragedy. It's an enormous tragedy. It's a story of human folly. That I think the real thing that occurs for the viewer is that we find ourselves rooting for Light because we want this to be a heroic victory, when in truth it's a tragedy. That Light's life is a tragedy. And what he does and how he acts with the power that he's given is tragic. Can we see any institution or any organization acting in a similar way on the world stage today? I think we can. Yeah, the CDC studied a bug in WoW because it followed transmission very effectively. Yeah. I mean, how like, what a rare and unusual situation. John, I really would love for you to make a Marxist analysis of the world government after the first half of the adventure. I mean, do an actual deep dive in how it parallels with our real world. Okay. You'll understand why as you get further into One Piece. Okay. Once you have a broader understanding of the world of One Piece. Yeah, right now it seems very disconnected. Like everything, like there is a monarchy. Like I don't know enough about it, and everything seems very much like there's the Marines, certainly. So that implies an empire of sorts. And of course there's pirates, so that empire is an empire that's in something of decline, and the Marines are always presented as corrupt, right? Like they're not better than the pirates. That they're basically just pirates that are official, right? And they're obviously weak because there are forces that are able to seize power in places, and the Marines aren't really able to get rid of them or fight back against them. And in many cases, the Marines work with them and become corrupted or are corrupted by them. So that, and there's definitely a monarchy and there's definitely that kind of stuff, but I don't think I know enough to be able to go beyond that. Right? So there is clearly a larger world at play, but right now they're kind of off on the islands, right? They're in the Grand Line right now. And I assume they don't spend their whole time there, that they probably come back from it. Monarchists believe that the strange woman lying in ponds and giving people swords is the basis for a system of government, not experience and a mandate for the masses. Women distributing swords is not an appropriate way to form a government. So the virus in the game made it into real-world practice? It was observed. We don't know to what degree. Corrupted blood incidents has its own Wikipedia page. Wow, making history. Yeah, you bet. Hey, DJ, how you doing, bud? Yeah, they pushed jobs business. Never see them talk about basic income. Yeah, the NDP. And it was a good game. Played an older one. Not sure. Hopefully one day can make a video game. One day I can make... I know, right? I have that impetus, too, that where I want to make a video game. But, like... It's the technical aspect of it, like the coding and all of that. That's like beyond me, I think. I feel like I would be good in terms of like a storytelling aspect or like I think I would be a useful resource on a project, but I could only really be a consultant, I think. There is only one entertainment company, Disney. Yeah, Disney paid them off to ruin, and Martin wanted 10 to 11 seasons. Dumb and Dumber said no and ruined it so they could rush off to Star Wars. I think that's absolutely the case, dude. HBO would have given them as many episodes as they wanted. Like, if those guys had said, we want to do 40 more seasons of this, we think we can do it, HBO would have been like, fuck yeah, let's go, right? And honestly, if like the thing that pisses me off the most about season 8 of Game of Thrones is what a fucking insult to those actors. What an enormous insult to those actors. These people have spent their prime, the prime of their lives was spent on this project. They worked on it for fucking 10 years, a decade of their life. They spent, and they are relying on this project to continue to propel them forward in their careers as artists and as actors, right? And I consider what these guys did to those actors as a complete and total betrayal to them on a personal level. I remember I saw behind the scenes where they were reading the scripts, right? And I'll never forget the actor that plays the spy master. I forget his name offhand. The Vivicini. And I remember he read through the scene where he dies. And after he finished, he was visibly angry. He was visibly angry. And he had every reason to be, right? His character was one of the best written characters on television at that time. A character who was insidious, sly, intelligent, and fighting for the peace. And they completely fucking betrayed him. They betrayed the character, and they betrayed that actor. And they betrayed the audience. Like, absolute, like, unforgivable, if you ask me. Like, if I find out, like, oh, those guys are on a project, I refuse to participate. Like, and this Disney schlock that's getting produced, right? This Disney fucking bullshit that's getting produced now, right? These are the people who are working on it. These fucking traitors who are literally willing to take 10 years of a person's life and just fucking dump them off the side of the boat. Like, and that's all of them. That's the guy that played Jon Snow, Daenerys. Like, what they did to Daenerys? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, they literally had her just snap and blow up a town. 'Cause she's crazy. Hucka, hucka, hucka. And what fucking Jon Snow did to that relationship and that character, where he's like literally like, she's my queen. She's my queen. She's my queen. Oops, I stabbed her. Like, and like, I'm not going to give you a spoiler warning. It's fucking worthless. Don't spend your time. Like, don't spend your time watching this. Like, it's a betrayal is what it does. And this is true of all of them. Fucking, what's his name? Littlefinger. Like, so you're telling me that this scheming, like, behind the scenes, backroom, literally playing the Game of Thrones guy who's ascended to the place that he's at because he's so intelligent and he's so good, finds himself in a position where he is with Sansa, Arya, and Bran, and he knows that Bran has a superpower so he can see everything, and he basically fucks himself over completely out of sheer stupidity. Like, this guy needed to go to Bran and be like, I know you know I was responsible for your father's death. Right? Like, Littlefinger was instrumental in the death of Eddard Stark. And here's a fucking psychic who knows for sure that he was in on that. And what does he do when there's a literal psychic who can see everything? He starts trying to pit sisters against one another under the nose of the psychic, as if these two sisters aren't going to just talk to one another and their psychic brother. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment what they did. And you can see that the culture responded to it. Like, remember, like, fucking the Raptors were using "We the North" as their slogan. Game of Thrones was deeply entrenched in the culture in serious ways. Like, Game of Thrones was a huge thing, and then season 8 came out, and it dropped right out. Everyone was just like, nope, it's over. So who wins? Disney. For sure. Disney. Can't have competitors. So once again, capitalism ruins everything. This is why we can't have nice things. Right? Instead of an artist looking at another artist and being like, oh, wow, you guys are making something really cool here. This is awesome. Good for you. Right? You got to destroy it because there can be only one. There's a joke about Varys. How do you get from Westeros to Essos? It varies because of how quick it goes from one place to another. Yeah, capitalism ruins everything, including Game of Thrones. Yeah, like it just became like, and part of the reason why Disney is producing this schlock is because they won't even read scripts unless you work for them. Right? Doesn't matter if you have a masterpiece. It doesn't matter if you're a masterpiece storyteller. Right? Doesn't matter. If you're not like working in the as a fucking gopher or something, they don't give a fuck. So it's created this like hyper incestuous storytelling system where you have to meet certain criteria to have your story told at all, right? And Disney has started to get really fucking meta and really like everything is a commentary on itself. Like, they can't just tell a good story. Everything needs to be like a cleansing and a political a retconning of their quote-unquote problematic elements. And it's getting stupid. Like, what they did to Cruella de Vil, for example. Like, Cruella de Vil's a fucking psycho. Like, the only reason Cruella de Vil isn't one of the great villains of cinematic history is because her objectives are so low level. And she herself is so powerless in many ways. Like, she's just a crazy rich woman who wants to kill 100 Dalmatians to make a coat. Like, that's her whole shtick, right? But if you took the energy of Cruella de Vil and put it into, like, I want to control the world or control some territory, I want to become a king or something, she'd be one of the great terrifying, like, Shakespearean villains of history. And they just fucking retconned her. They got rid of her. They removed the elements of who she was to try to change her into something that she never was in the first place. No, this isn't the 24-hour stream, dude. I've actually already been up 24 hours. So if I tried to do another 24 hours, I think I would go mad. I actually do need to go to sleep. I don't know, dude. I need this. I need to just talk about bullshit. Like, I need to talk about the arts and all of this kind of stuff. Because, like, life is... I can't just talk about fucking Ukraine and fucking how the NDP suck, right? The politics and all this kind of stuff. Like, I want to talk about other stuff. I want to talk about light stuff. I want people to... I want to talk about One Piece. I want to talk about the art and because there's good shit in the world. There is good shit in the world. It's absolutely the truth, right? Like, I'm playing this Elden Ring game and I'm having a great time. It is a great time. It's pretty telling that people want to transpose themselves into like a hellish dystopian nightmare where they can destroy undead instead of just live in the world they live in. Pretty telling. Pretty big indictment of our current system, if you ask me. But at the same time, like Redline. Redline's a fucking great time. You want to have a great time with a movie, man? You want to spend 2 hours and just have a fucking good time? Redline, right? And even something like Game of Thrones, where we're like bitching about it. I'm like, yeah, but like, that's fun too. You know what really pisses me off about what Disney's doing is that it's really, really clear that they know that people are going to see their movies specifically to hate it. Like, they know. So this has completely incentivized them to not bother making good stuff, right? Because why? You're going to go see it anyway, right? You're going to go see their shit anyway and then talk about how much you hated it. And so they're going to make stuff that sucks so that you can hate it, right? I hate that shit. I can't stand it, right? Like, who's actually making good art anymore? Like, and like this new the Batman with Robert Pattinson, right? This absolutely fantastic actor, just like completely blown up, like completely blown up by dumb like Twilight, this Batman dreck that they're just spitting out, where we're supposed to take Bruce Wayne seriously. Like, that's the thing that I just can't get over. I can't get over that, like, Bruce Wayne has like a severe mental illness. Like, it's severe. Like, he is obsessed with the death of his parents to the degree that he is willing to fund enormous, large-scale, military-grade projects, all which have to be made to the specifications of a bat, so that he can go beat up people with mental illnesses. Instead of taking any amount of money out of that project and just attempting to alleviate the poverty and the suffering that's generating the situation that's causing him to beat these people up in the first place. It's a psychosis that he's experiencing. Like, and Batman is really emblematic of how the billionaire class operates. That they will actively fund as much destructive shit, as much explosive, destructive shit as they can in order to fight against this darkness, because to simply relinquish their wealth and resolve the issue at the source wouldn't make them the superhero, would it? They wouldn't be the guy with the fucking like and that's like, we're supposed to worship Batman when all I see is a little boy that never grew up and he's just cosplaying, right? And everybody around him is just enabling the shit out of him. Alfred is just enabling the fucking shit out of this kid, right? Like, Gordon is enabling the shit out of this kid. Like, nobody at any point is like, this guy's obviously insane, right? Like, really, what is Batman doing, right? What is Bruce Wayne doing, right? He's put together a underground lair underneath the mansion that he was given when he was a kid. So already, right? I don't need to go any farther than this. That's fucking crazy. He lives in a mansion that he has lived in when he was a kid after his parents were killed in a back alley in front of his eyes. And he lives in this mansion, right? Alone. And he goes off and he like learns martial arts so that he can fight the persistent evil that exists in the world endlessly. Has a real like, let's go fight the terrorists Iraq war sort of feel to it. And he builds like this underground base where he has a computer so he can do his like detective work or whatever. And he spends his nights dressed up in a fucking bat costume. Like, he's not just in Kevlar and shit. It's all like made to specifications so that he'll look like a goddamn bat. Which, incidentally, is the goofiest style shit ever. He looks fucking ridiculous. Like for fuck's sake. Like, for fuck's sake. The Batman. Go away. Look at how goddamn stupid this guy looks. He looks fucking ridiculous. I'm a serious person. Take me seriously. For real. Like, I'm a serious person. Take me seriously. Please. Deadly serious. Absolutely someone who we should absolutely be entrusting, like, fucking high grade, high level technology. Like, please tell me, significantly, like, what looks stupider? Like, really? Like who's crazier in this situation? Right? Who's fucking crazier in this situation? Like, and this is supposed to be the hero. We're supposed to look at this guy and think, yeah, I'm really rooting for this guy. I gotta tell you, I do not root for Batman. I really, really don't. Like, I root for him to get the help he needs to get over this psychosis and to start using his money in an effective way to actually alleviate the poverty that he constantly fights against. Right? If fucking Bruce Wayne, instead of buying a fucking bat jet, used that money to alleviate poverty, men like the Joker would never have henchmen. No one would follow this guy anywhere. Right? A guy like this would walk into a bar and be like, hey guys, you want to do some crime? And everybody would be like, no bro, thanks. Right? But because of the desperation that is brought by poverty, caused by the mass hoarding of wealth by who? This guy. When this guy walks in and says, hey, do you want to do some crime, maybe make some money? They go, well, I got nothing else going on and I'd like to eat today. Like, Batman is not a fucking hero. He's not even an anti-hero. Batman's the villain of the story. He always has been. We just haven't realized it. And if you actually watch any of the Batman stuff, any of it, and you realize this, you realize that he's the villain, you can't unsee it. And it's in all of it. All of it. He is always the cause of the problem. He is the reason the problem exists, and he could always solve the problem by relinquishing some of his capital for the benefit of the society that he lives in, and he chooses instead to drop bombs on them. That's every Batman story that has ever existed. Night Owl, yeah. The spoiled billionaire can't get it up unless he's in a costume. Yeah. right? And in the end, it's just completely ineffectual to the actual forces of the world, right? To the actual people who are actually doing shit, right? Like, and Ozymandias is like, Ozymandias is a Batman character, right? Like, he's just a billionaire who's using his wealth in order to influence world politics. And what does he do with it? He destroys a fucking city. Like, for the benefit of mankind, to unify them, right? Like, we have deluded ourselves into believing that the most reprehensible figures, Batman is a reprehensible figure. He is irredeemable. The only way a figure like Batman could ever redeem himself is if he repented for his sins and relinquished his capital for the benefit of the society that he lives in. Right? Like, all he'd really have to do is put even a little bit of money into fucking some security at Arkham Asylum. How many Batman stories begin with someone just escaping from Arkham Asylum? Or Arkham Asylum falling into chaos? Or something like this. Like, there comes a point where you have to think that Bruce Wayne is doing it on purpose. He's like leaving a hole in the side of the building so the insane criminals he can beat up can escape. When he could literally take a small amount of money, probably less amount of money than the jet that he blows up every time he fights one of these guys, and just say to Arkham Asylum, tighten up that security. Why is this Joker guy getting out of here every fucking month? Why is this fucking crocodile dude getting out of here every fucking month? Right? Why is this whole rogue gallery of people? Why are they constantly getting out of here? All the time. And anytime you actually see Arkham Asylum shown in the comics, it's fucking falling apart. The whole thing, it's like, it's a ramshackle. It's a shithole. And Batman has the capital and the ability to tighten it up and make it good and keep everyone safe and secure, but that's not what he wants. Why? Because he needs people like this. Because if there aren't people like this, then he can't justify his existence. Because his whole ethos and his whole thing is tied up in the idea that he's going to beat these guys up. And if he actually eliminated their existence, then he wouldn't be a crime fighter. Because he shouldn't be a crime fighter. He's just a scared little boy that never grew up and can't get over the death of his parents. That's all he is. And we're supposed to be like, yeah, great. Let's watch a 15th movie of this. What do we got? We got. If you go back to the 60s, right? You got the Batman movie, right? Which at least was a faff, right? And then you got the Batman with Michael Keaton, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, right? And then you got the trilogy that comes out of what's his name, Inception, dude, right? Which in my view were a critical failure. Right? You literally did a trilogy about a character and you didn't actually do a character study of the character that your movies are about. That's a critical failure. Like, at least these movies were like just a gothic expression of fun. Right? At least they were just like kind of faffy and just kind of like whoopity-whoopity. Right? This trilogy attempted to take itself seriously and it didn't even do a character study. The protagonist was literally walking around talking like this. Oh, man! I'm a serious character. I've definitely done a character study of this. Get completely fucked. And now they've got the Batman. Right? And that's not even including all like the cartoon movies that they've done. Like, how many times do we need to see this story before we actually start telling the story of who is Bruce Wayne? Why does he act the way he acts? Is it acceptable? Why are we not actually doing a character study of this guy? And I think the reason why we're not actually doing a genuine character study, like we did with the Joker in Joker, the reason why we're not doing a character study of Bruce Wayne is because there is only one position to take. He is suffering from a deep psychosis, and what he does is not okay. And our veneration of him as a hero is weird. It's odd that we put a guy like this beside someone like Superman and say, these guys are equivalent in our ethos. What? What? Batman Year 100 is pretty cool. Batman is like an underground rebel fighting a Reaganite fascist state. Also, the art is really weird and cool. Yeah, I mean, like, that's... like, oh, for fuck's sake, what's that? The Frank Miller run. Batman. Come on, where he's old. Like, it's fun to explore and it's interesting, but just like, I'm grown up. Like, I'm over it now. Like, I'm not a little kid anymore. Right? Like, who is this guy? Why have we been spending our entire lives giving him space in our culture without actually exploring who he is or what he does? He knows where you live and what you want for Christmas. He could drone deliver you a gift and never notice a drop in his decimals. Yeah. Although he's not Bruce Wayne or a billionaire in the story, I think his identity remains a mystery. It's really only Batman in name, come to think of it. Nah, but that's okay. Like, fundamentally, the reason why we are attracted to Batman is not because he's a human. We very specifically do not treat Batman like a human. We don't call him Bruce Wayne. He's Batman, right? Like, he's not, he's a ghost. He's an ethos. He's a spirit. He's a force. And that force is vigilantism. That's why we're attracted to him. Because he's a vigilante, right? He's very much that kind of spirit of like Western justice, right? Of like the Western gunslinger. The man who has the righteous truth and operates outside the law, following his own spiritual guidance and ethos, which we determine to be true and correct. And Batman in many ways self-justifies himself simply because he says, I refuse to kill the people. So as long as he cripples them and doesn't kill them, he's good, I guess. But fundamentally, he's a vigilante. And we love vigilantes. We venerate and worship vigilante justice in our society. And that's who he is, and that's what he does. Dave McKean, Arkham is about the Joker, proving Batman belongs in Arkham with the rest of the insane villains is genius. Best Batman comic ever. Yeah. I mean, I hope one day that somebody actually does tell that story on the big screen. Because I think it would be a really powerful story about society itself. Like, Joker really showed that you can tell powerful stories with these characters. That if you treat these characters as human and you tell the human story of what they're experiencing, it can be a powerful story. Like, the story of Joker is fundamentally about what happens to a person if you abandon them. That's really what it's about. And it's the reason why our society couldn't handle it. Because it told a lot of truths about how our society operates and what it does, and ultimately shows that the people who turn against the society that abandons them are not unreasonable. That it has a kind of a logic to it. It makes a type of sense. And that's what I think terrifies people about the film Joker. Is that people want to abandon each other. That's the whole ethos of individualism. Right? Is to abandon people. And Joker shows them, well, this is what happens if you do that. And it makes them deeply uncomfortable. One of the most fascinating things that I witnessed about Joker was that the reviews that panned it or said that it was bad refused to talk about mental illness. If they did, it was like paragraph 23 and it was 2 lines. Like, mental illness is the beating heart. It's the theme of the film. Right? Arthur has a significant mental illness and is obviously struggling with it, and we abandon him. You get what you fucking deserve. You get what you fucking deserve. Alright, I think that's the end of me, guys. I'm very tired. I'm going to go to bed. Always remember, guys, for those of you who are still listening, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the vain hope that you'll never realize it and stay the good little commodity that they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.